person in Harris Hall and to anyone watching online. We will start off our meeting this morning by checking in to see if there are any adjustments to the agenda from the administrator. No. None. To the board? Seeing none. Any emergency business this morning, Mr. Mokreski? None. Then we will move directly into county administration. Usually we start our public comment right at 9, but we do have a very brief item of business beforehand. So I will welcome our budget and financial planning manager, Christine Moody, to the table, and Kevin Mahoney, our senior budget analyst, for a brief item, which is a public hearing and order and resolution 24-10-08-01 in the matter of adopting the fiscal year supplemental budget 1. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning, Chair Traeger, Vice Chair Lovall, and Commissioners. This is the first supplemental budget for FY 24-25. The 24-25 budget was originally adopted by the board in June of 24. And being the first supplemental budget of the fiscal year, this is the first opportunity for departments to adjust known changes in revenues and expenditures since the budget development process. Capital improvement project budgets and the related transfers for those are being adjusted in several funds to align with the timing of what's currently planned to occur in FY 24-25. And a capital fund is being created in the Department of Public Works, along with budgeting the resources and expenditures related to the Clean Lane Resource Recovery Facility. Parole and probation is requested to retain funding of one-time general fund transfer despite receiving additional other funding. The request is the result of updated expenditure levels for fiscal year 24-25 compared to the projections from the fall of 23. And the budget officer recommends approval of that request. FTE changes are all in Health and Human Services, include adjustments to 2 existing physician positions, the addition of 1.5 FTE physician position, and then a technical adjustment deleting 2 previously planned positions partially offset those changes for a net increase of 0.33. And again, that's within Health and Human Services and countywide. There's no other changes. The only other change countywide related to FTE is the addition of the resources and expenses for a paralegal position, which was approved on a board order on September 26th. With that, that concludes the summary from staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Motion?
Seeing none, ready for a motion. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Chair, I move approval of the order resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024-25 supplemental budget
Vice Chair,
number
sorry.
1.
Oh, excuse me.
Interrupting because we had a comment real quick.
Sorry.
Before you do that.
Sorry, we have
Not your
a public
fault.
hearing this morning.
Oh, thank you. Didn't have a script or a sign-in, but if there's anyone here to give comment on the supplemental budget, thank you, Christine. Oh, thank you. All right. This is a public hearing on a supplemental budget for the current fiscal year budget as allowed under ORS 294.471 and ORS 294.473. This public hearing is required under ORS 294.473 due to one or more funds amending expenditures by more than 10% from current budgeted amounts. Notice of this hearing and summary of the changes was published as detailed in the supplemental budget order and resolution included in this agenda item. Participants may testify for or against any item contained in the supplemental budget. I will now open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to comment on the supplemental budget. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask if there are any additional comments from staff.
No additional, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then now.
Could I check online?
Oh, thank you, Tanya. I've never done this before. Thank you so much. See what happens. We have a down week. We come back and I'm all out of sorts. Yes, please, if there's anyone online. Thank you, Tanya.
All right, thanks. If you're online attending virtually the 10-8 BCC meeting, and you'd like to give public comment on the supplemental one for the current fiscal year, please raise your virtual hand. Thank you. I do not see anyone raising their virtual hand, so I'll return it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Tanya. I'll really close the public hearing now and see if there's any additional comment from staff.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. To the board, if there's any discussion, seeing none. One more time, ready for a motion.
I'm just checking to
Vice
make
Chair.
sure the name tags are right here as we go forward. Yeah, Chair, I'd like to move approval of the order resolution adopting the fiscal year 24-25 supplemental budget number 1 making, reducing, and transferring appropriations per order and resolution 24100801.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Passage of Order and Resolution 24-10-08-01 in the matter of adopting fiscal year 2024-2025 supplemental budget number 1. Thank you so much. Okay, now we can move into public comment. Anyone who wishes to provide 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes before the Board of County Commissioners may do so. I have a sign-in sheet before me, so we'll go through folks who are here in Harris Hall first. Then I'll turn it over to Tanya to manage anyone wishing to give comment online, and then I'll check back to see if anyone arrived late in Harris Hall wishing to speak before the board. When I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin, and the timer is on the wall. And first this morning, I'll welcome Dre Charles to the podium. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Dre Charles, here representing the NAACP from Eugene Springfield. Start now? Perfect. So the Eugene Springfield NAACP strongly opposes the proposed off-cycle redistricting changes to Lane County's home rule charter due to concerns about the process, timing, and intent behind the proposal. These changes appear to borrow heavily from a previous statewide IP that garnered broad support, including from our branch. However, that support does not extend to this county-specific proposal. Proponents' implication that the NAACP supports and endorses this, based on the statewide IP, is misleading, problematic, and undermines our organization's commitment to transparent and equitable governance. To be clear, the Eugene Springfield NAACP does not support this measure. We also raised concerns about one of the proposal's key proponents, who has previously sought to defund county equity initiatives through the erasure of its equity department, casting further doubt on the motives behind these changes and their potential negative impact on marginalized communities. The current plan is problematic on several fronts. It includes 2 main components. The first is the county modified version of this previous statewide IP, which, despite some philosophical merit, contains numerous technical issues. The second, more troubling aspect is the so-called housekeeping measure. Initially, the proposal permanently defined a north-south boundary within Eugene, locking the WIT into South Eugene and shifting North Eugene toward a more conservative base. Such a boundary change politicizes the process, contrary to the proposal's purported goal of reducing partisanship. Additionally, the proposal contains vague language about partisanship considerations, which could prevent the redistricting committee from addressing unfair maps. Our branch urges the rejection of this proposal and calls for a transparent, nonpartisan process that reflects the needs and values of all Lane County residents. Furthermore, we demand an immediate cessation of any willful or unintentional misuse of our branch's name or brand by public officials. It is unacceptable for proponents of this measure to mislead the public by falsely implying NAACP support where none exists. The integrity of our organization and its commitment to equity must not be manipulated to serve political agendas. Public officials must be held accountable for any statements that distort that support and mislead the community. We stand firm in our commitment to transparency and fair representation, and any attempt to undermine these principles is an affront to both the public trust and the values of democracy and will be taken very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Jim Belknap, who will be followed by David Eigel.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jim Belknap, and I appreciate the chance to visit very briefly. I am here today to address the F2 zoning issue, which you're going to have quite a conversation this afternoon on that, I understand. I have been engaged as a land use consultant for the last 35 years or so, and I work primarily with private landowners. I think that there is a common misperception that the F2 issue is only affecting major timber owners, land barons, speculators, And I'd like to say that that is clearly not the case. I have been working for some time with an 83-year-old widow who lives east of Cottage Grove. She owns a 7-acre parcel that is unimproved, zoned F2. Adjoining that's a 2.5-acre parcel where she has her very modest home. She lost her husband about 11 years ago, and at his passing, she came to me and asked for some counsel on what to do with her property. I said, well, if you don't need to sell it, hang on to it. It will go up in value. But there are some things you should do. So we completed a legal lot verification on the 7-acre parcel. It is recognized as a lawfully established unit of land. We did not proceed with the template test for the dwelling because that only has a 4-year window once that's approved. The property would readily qualify for an F2 dwelling. Template test shows about 20 parcels within the 160-acre grid. I think that would indicate to you that it is built up, residentially improved, but it's in a major big game habitat area. So this 7-acre parcel cannot be built on given the current situation with our F2 zoning. Pardon me. This is of significant importance to my friend. And I think that there are many people in this county that are in a similar situation. So I would ask when you vote this afternoon, if you get to a point of voting, but at least as you consider this, to think about my 83-year-old widow friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is David Heigl, who will be followed by Mike Evans.
David Eigel. Over the past decade, the widespread use of fraudulent stories, often by non-Oregonians, lying about the conduct of Oregonian white Protestants, has been appalling. A current case is Talisha Brown, a Black Californian transplant who founded the Black Cultural Initiative. She and her associates have been telling horrific lies to obtain hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a memorial commemorating a late 1940s tale of Eugene history. Her narrative is pure fiction. Brown is a licensed massage therapist, not an historian. She gives speeches that contain vicious falsehoods and solicits donations for this. I can only speculate as to her motivation. Does she seek to obtain public recognition through this activity that she desperately craves but is unable to obtain through her work? Under Oregon state law, it is a Class A misdemeanor to make misrepresentations to obtain charitable donations. I have filed a criminal complaint with the Oregon State Attorney General's office against Brown and others. Commissioner Traeger used a microphone at the recent North Bank celebration to blare out that she was Jewish to a largely black audience, that Jews have supported blacks, and that the closure of the Ferry Street community in 1949 was racism. What Traeger failed to mention during her rant was that a third of that community's residents were white. Traeger was talking rot. Eugene has a proud, well-documented history of more than 125 years of black residents. Federal census records confirm this. Even the severely deceptive Race to Change displays showed photos of early 20th century black Eugene residents. Traeger is a planned transplant to Oregon from the Northeast, is also noteworthy for a lack of formal education as well as her intellectual shallowness. As is often the case with such people, they attach themselves to crackpot ideologies and bloviate nonsense, unaware they are making fools of themselves. The Eugene police have informed me that individuals who have been deceived into making charitable donations may file complaints with their department. Commissioner Traeger has used public money and institutions to promote her own private bigotry. Eugene was not a sundown town, not by a mile. And in fact, if I will go into in future presentations and tell you about the Methodist Episcopal Church on Willamette Street, which was a center of abolitionist people and their descendants who advocated interracial activities, including marriage. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up is Mike Evans.
Commissioners, I'm Mike Evans, a mostly retired land use consultant. And I want to comment on the wildlife habitat issue that is involved with the King appeal applications this afternoon. The issue doesn't have to be as confusing and conflicted as what it appears to be. It's really simple. you guys, the commissioners, simply need to interpret the county commissioner policy regarding Go 12, Go to the wildlife habitat density restrictions. I was involved, as a matter of fact, I was a planner with Lane County when the comprehensive planning process began in the 1980s. I wasn't involved when the plan was ultimately adopted, but had been involved in the public hearings process and that sort of thing. And clearly that policy didn't exist as being applied after all the different negotiations occurred between the DLCD staff and Lane County, Board of County Commissioners. And if that policy was intended to be applied, it would have been in the code. Since then, for 40 years, the code has been applied, only the code. And it's LUBA's misinterpretation of that policy that needs to be cured, as simple as that. Very quickly, like Jim Belknap, there's one client that friend, bought a piece of property, cost him several $100,000, I'm sure. Got a building permit on it, intending to build. As Jim said, those permits time out. He timed out because of a job change and that sort of thing. Came back in to get a building permit, and lo and behold, he couldn't get a building permit. So now he's got a piece of property, paid lots of money for, can't build on it. You might, I don't know how many other people might be out there, but like Jim, I'm sure there are a lot of them. I would encourage you to ask staff how many people might be out there like that, not just people that they've run across, but they could do a research of how many F2 properties are below 40 acres, below 80 acres, that sort of thing, would be candidates for template dwellings, and get an idea of what the large impact this wildlife habitat restriction has. And it's not something that's mandated by the state. The state has very, as you know, very strict standards in order to build in rural areas. We're after housing, aren't we? Whether in the cities or in the county. Why have a restriction that's tighter than the states that disallows building in Lane County that otherwise should be buildable, has been buildable for 40 years, and suddenly isn't? All you have to do is interpret the policy. It doesn't have to be complicated, like I said. Can be. It's simply adopting new policy. You've got the language, I believe, from Home Builders Association, maybe others that allow you to do that, and I just urge you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Tanya, that concludes everyone on my sign-in sheet here. Would you like to see if there's anyone wishing to give comment this morning online?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If you are attending the virtual 10-8 BCC meeting and you would like to give public comment, please raise your virtual hand. Samantha, I see you would like to give public comment. Would you like to be on camera?
That's okay. Can you hear me?
I can, so you may begin your public comment.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Samantha Beach, and my husband and I are residents in Lane County. We are here today to entreat the Board of Commissioners to allow forest template dwelling permits to be granted on F2 parcels regardless of their size. My husband and I have been waiting to build on an 8-acre parcel in F2 zoning and big game habitat for over 3 years, and the restriction of building permits on parcels less than 80 acres has made it impossible for us to do so. There are many pieces of land in this county that would fit the rules and regulations for a template dwelling permit if this restriction was not in place, and the refusal of the county to allow new buildings in this zone on parcels smaller than 80 acres has rendered useless many properties that are already prepared to be built on. The development of appropriate land would benefit both the owners and the county, creating revenue as well as providing more houses in a county that could certainly use them. We are speaking up because of our love of the land and our desire to see it used for good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Joe, I showed that you would like to give public comment.
Hello.
Hello. Would you like to be on camera?
No.
All right, then you may begin your public comment.
Okay. Joe Tyndall. I'm in Pat Farr's district. Social justice is an Orwellian term advocating the exact opposite of justice. Delisha Brown and her Black Cultural Initiative want money to enshrine her woke, all white people are bad, reverse racist narrative. And I am talking to you, Lori Trigger, for endorsing this dishonest shrine to anti-white racism. Now that the Dunn Hall denaming is proven to be based on fraudulent scholarship, you have failed to take action to redress the defamation of a pillar of this community. That racist, revisionist history was perpetuated by racists in the name of being anti-racist. Plus, Lori, you seem oblivious to the reality that in a speech identifying as Jewish to score oppression Olympic points is also, in fact, a racist act. Talacia claims, quote, in 1949, Black people were not allowed to live in Eugene. She cites the allegedly racist closure of the Ferry Street Bridge community for evidence. In science, researchers scour data to find patterns. In cults, zealots cherry pick and misinterpret anything they believe bolsters their dogma. They then deny every contradictory fact. Years ago, schools taught skepticism and critical thinking. Today, woke education pushes critical race theory intersectionality that shouts one single reply to anything they disagree with. That's racist, and you need to be punished. In the eyes of the woke mob, all Blacks are victims and all whites are oppressors. They ignore all information not in accord with that distorted opinion. Yes, the Black folks squatting on the Ferry Street land were removed, but so were poor white people. Will Talacia Brown shed a tear for the white folks displaced at the same time by the same closure of the same land? I doubt it. To top this off, in 1949, Black folks actually lived in houses in Eugene. The sooner social justice wokeism is eradicated, the sooner we can get back to Martin Luther King's colorblind, equality of opportunity, meritocratic society improving quite nicely in America before the woke so-called anti-racism, pure racism, racist madness spread. In Morgan Freeman's words, the best way to end racism is to stop talking about it. Do not give these race grifters tax money to further push their toxic, fraudulent, history revisionist, racist insanity. Reverse racism is racism.
Thank you for your public comments. I do not see any other virtual hands raised, so I will return the meeting back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Is there anyone else who's arrived in Harris Hall wishing to give public comment this morning? Seeing none, I will close the public comment portion. And next item is Commissioner's response to public comment or any other issues or remonstrance to the board. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. I have three things to say this morning, all thought through and all, I think, well stated. So be listening, please. First thing is look across the street. Farmers Market is in operation today, as it is every Tuesday. It's a different season, different produce. If you've not been there recently, go over there today. It's grown throughout Lane County. It's called Lane County's Farmers Market, and there's great stuff happening if you look through that back window right now. The second thing is regarding analyses. Different analyses of the same set of data and presumed facts lead different people to draw different conclusions. Sometimes it's the same set of data that creates different conclusions, and sometimes the sets of data are distinctly different. While facts are irrefutable, sometimes facts are misrepresented, either in error or sometimes intentionally. I find myself the third vote on many issues. Quite often, it's never the same two people who I'm the third vote with, based on our own, I hope, experience and pure interpretation of the facts as they've been presented to us. When facts are changed or research demonstrates that the facts we thought were irrefutable are questioned by new data, then we have the responsibility to take a look at what we thought were the facts and reevaluate. And I hope that we're all able to do that. Now, along those lines, I'm going to say something that I hadn't written, but it's regarding personal attacks on members of the Board of County Commissioners. That's not something I like. I don't like that. I don't appreciate it. It's not. We're sitting up here and we're kind of an open target. If you have something to say about a commissioner, please say it in a different venue than right here in public, because we are not able to respond in any way that we can. Once again, we all work on sets of facts and sets of data based upon our own experience, our own pure interpretation of the facts as we see them. And I would hope that every single county commissioner believes that same thing. And the last thing is, Mr. Charles, thanks for being here this morning. I want to thank you personally for your work on the Bethel School Board, leading that entire board into a completely new direction with a great superintendent and really good things happening. Willamette High School, yeah. Go Wolverines. And also, I received a copy of the letter that you read this morning. I'm looking at every single sentence, every single line on that letter, and I hope that you and I can get together later on and talk about the letter and talk about the things that we can do to get our heads together on how to move forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Charles.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. You know, we provide this time for public comment for anybody to come up and say whatever they would like to us every Tuesday. And they have every right to say whatever is on their mind. However, I find it very disturbing that we are attracting public comment that is really trying to promote white nationalism and white supremacy. This has no place in Lane County whatsoever. For people to come up and attack Ms. Talisha Brown, the Black Cultural Initiative, something that the county is very in support of. I personally support them. And to deny the history of our founding Black families is profoundly disturbing. I don't want to see it. I don't think it has a place for us here in Lane County. We have already declared in the past that support of white supremacy, white nationalism is an affront to our public health and our community. It is destabilizing and it is morally abhorrent. I know that we will likely continue to hear this issue in front of us in public comment, but I'm going to push back and say it has no place here. We don't need to promote this, and in fact, each and every one of us on this board should take the opportunity when we hear things like this to make a statement and say, this shouldn't be happening, and we don't agree. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Yeah, we have some excellent comments from my colleagues this morning, and I support each one of them. Obviously, it's your right to do and say what you want to do in front of the commissioners. We recognize that we're also human, we have feelings, and we can't respond, so I agree with that. And thank you for Commissioner Buck for your intensity and passion about what you described. I would wholeheartedly agree. I also want to also throw this out too. One, I appreciate everyone coming, even if I don't like what you say. But I think Commissioner Farr said something I thought was pretty significant too, is that he wants to meet with people who disagree with him. And I've been a commissioner that's done that. Anytime I've gotten an email from someone who thinks a certain way or has a filter about how they view me, I put out what I would like to meet with them in a very indirect and immediate fashion. And Mr. Charles, I put out that to you a number of weeks ago without a response, so I would appreciate a response to my invitation to meet, please. And further, as far as my position on racism, my late son was from Uganda. I just returned a few weeks ago from 3 weeks serving the Black community in Uganda. I've done so for 13 years. And so I would invite the community to, before they say something derogatory about a commissioner, research what they're really about and who they are, and maybe your comments might change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Seneca.
Yes, thanks everybody for coming out. This is the beauty of the county commissioners meetings. It is your chance to tell us exactly what you're thinking. I will stand with the board and say that, personal attacks are tough because we're putting ourselves out here. We're up here. We're an easy target. I also have invited anybody that disagrees with me to come grab a coffee, swing by the office. I'll come by your office. And I find those meetings to be very productive. You can be a little more candid. You can really get to know somebody. And I think it's something we should do. We're here to represent our constituents, and we're here to get to know you, and we're here to meet you. Mr. Charles, I didn't know you're a school board member, fellow school board member here. And nothing will bring to light why you put in public service like being on the school board, so thank you. I truly appreciate that. Mr. Belknap, that story hit with the widow. I've had multiple phone calls with single spouses that are stuck with properties and they can't sell them, and a lot of people, these were their retirements, and it's truly disheartening and something we'll need to look at. In fact, this morning I was speaking with a lady that was in tears about some things with LMD that is it's financially crushing. So thank you for your public comment. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate everyone's comments. And I think I will just leave it at, as far as, meeting with people you don't agree with. Individual experience and personal identity are not things to be agreed with or disagreed with. They are personal and individual facts. And as for some of the comments made this morning that were grossly misrepresenting comments I made in a public setting, my comments can be seen online. I am proud of my comments. I stand by my comments at the event hosted by the Black Cultural Initiative, and they have a YouTube channel where you can see mine along with the comments of all the other speakers that day. They were powerful, they were impactful, they were personal, and they are something for people to receive, and how people feel about them as they're receiving them is their own experience, just as what each of us speakers shared is our own experience, not something to be agreed with or disagreed with. Thank you all so much again for coming this morning. And I will also just issue a word of caution that we do listen carefully to the content of what is said, and if it borders on or steps across the border of posing a threat to a commissioner, we will have your microphone cut and ask you to stop your comments and reconsider next time before making comments that are directly issuing of threats to commissioners. That will absolutely not be tolerated, and that is not something to be agreed with or disagreed with. That is just a rule we have here. Again, thank you all for your comment, particularly Commissioner Farr for pointing out the waning days of the farmers market. It's one of the best things about Tuesdays here, and encourage everyone to get out there and support the local economy and local agricultural and spend some money across the street today. With that, we will move on to the next item, which is our consent calendar. These are items considered to be routine by commissioners, and so will be passed in a single motion without any discussion. All the materials relating to items on our consent calendar are available online by clicking the View Material button on the online agenda. And with that, I'll look for a motion.
Chair, I move approval and adoption of the consent calendar for Tuesday, October 8th, 2024 as presented.
Is there a second? Thank you. It's been moved by Vice Chair, seconded by Commissioner Buck. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. And next, a very exciting item on our agenda. This is Order 24-10-08-03 in the matter of approving one grant and accepting $1,170,540 from the Criminal Justice Commission for the Behavioral Health Deflection Program and delegating authority to County Administrator to execute and award the documents in any subcontracts. And with that, I will welcome Greg Rickoff, our Community Justice and Rehabilitation Services Director, to the table, along with Clint Riley, our Lane County Deflection Program Coordinator. It's so good to have you here in this capacity. Good morning, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you all.
Chair Trieger, Commissioners, thank you very much. We also have with us today Sarah Truelove, so that Clint and I can focus on the materials, and she's going to help us with the slides. I've been with you once before to talk about deflection, but that was prior to Clint Riley having a chance to start. As you know, the county is extremely fortunate to have the Sheriff's Office former jail commander to do this particular piece of work. He has vast experience in housing and supporting community members in a carceral setting through that, he has developed a number of service programs, and he has remarkably accomplished, remarkably established strong, valuable relationships with the partners that are at the heart of this work, talking not only about the 11 law enforcement agencies here in the county, but all of the treatment providers as well, and peer negotiation teams as well. So we have somebody really bringing remarkable experience. He has indeed hit the ground running, and he's going to talk a little bit about House Bill 4002 and the work to reform Measure 110 and what we're doing about it in Lane County.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. A little background. Measure 110 reform. It was signed into law April 1st. House Bill 4002. Really the intent behind that was to the creation of a deflection program to deflect folks away from the criminal justice system and towards a treatment door. Inside the House bill, it calls for a collaboration between law enforcement and behavioral health entities, assist individuals that have a substance use disorder or an untreated mental health disorder, and it creates community pathways to treatment, recovery, housing, case management, and other services. Now we'll talk about the program budget. We started out when Greg was in front of you guys back in, I think that was April, May. That was to get the first tranche of money to come in when the county decided we were going to put together a deflection program. That first tranche of money was approved. Inside that, that was where we had to come up with kind of the model we were going to create here in Lane County if we got funding. And now we're back in front of you today. We got approved for the second piece of that funding. And then we kind of lucked out too. 36 counties in Oregon, 23 put in for deflection programs, 13 decided not to. So as they allocated the money across the state, we actually got more money than we thought we were going to get. So we started out with 1.9 and we ended up with 2.12 million to create our deflection program. So they just kind of evenly distributed that across the state based on the percentage of how you would have gotten funding. Timeline. So here's our quick timeline. Seems like just yesterday I was retiring from the sheriff's office. So, quick timeline. Lane County decided to develop a deflection program, and we decided to use what's called the LEAD model, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. It's an effective and proven model that has been used in other communities around the nation. We studied that model, and we thought if we were going to go after a deflection program, the LEAD model is the one we wanted. This model utilizes peer navigators to work directly with law enforcement officers. Describing how we would use this model was part of the application process for our funding. Applications to secure funding was completed in April and then again in July. Full funding approval came in August. Work groups were created to work on specific design of the LEAD model for Lane County. These work groups consisted of many partners from our community: law enforcement, the district attorney's office, courts, local treatment providers, nonprofit organizations, as well as other members from our community. Once we had full funding in August, we put together a request for proposal process to go out and select a vendor for our peer navigation services. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but we were able to get that RFP out and get a vendor selected and get them in place during this timeline that we're on right here. Another piece that I thought was super crucial, and you guys hear about it all the time, if we don't have housing to put folks into, if we're going to deflect them, I don't know how deflections can be as successful as we want it to be. So I put another RFP out for specific housing for those being deflected, and I was able to secure a contract there, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Contracting services and staffing. Ideal Option is a local medical provider here in our community. They were awarded the navigation services for deflection. They were selected as a vendor in late September, and they will provide 5 peer navigators and a supervisor. Each navigator will carry a caseload for folks that are deflected. They will help folks navigate the system and access the treatment that is right for them. Navigators will be available to law enforcement 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It will work directly with law enforcement at the time of deflection. Ideal Option went right to work hiring navigators, and I believe they have all those positions filled. So in a matter of a couple weeks, they have them all filled. Reveille was selected as our vendor for housing. They will provide up to 20 units for folks in deflection that need that resource. They will also assist the individuals as they navigate the system on long-term goals such as obtaining benefits, healthcare treatment, and long-term housing. Christine Atkinson has been selected to be the Senior Program Coordinator for the Deflection Program. She's transferring over from PMP and she starts next week. So me and her will be the deflection office for Lane County. Courtney Runkle from the DA's office will be assigned as the paralegal to support the program. Okay. This is a lot of work that we did over the summer. This was our model. So deflection is offered at the first contact. So if you look up there, deflection will happen when someone's done a low-level quality of life type crime, drug possession, trespassing, disorderly conduct, those crimes that substance use disorder, mental health needs are there. Deflection looks like what we built down below. If someone's not deflected, they go up into the existing criminal justice system. So first night they're offered that at first contact. The second contact is really where the work begins with someone that gets deflected. They meet with their peer navigator, case manager, they sign a release of information, and client engaged treatment plan is developed. With the assistance of the navigator, they start accessing services from a provider in our community. One thing I want to point out too, Ideal Option, they got the navigation contract and they're a medical provider in our community. They're not going to take people directly to Ideal Option. They're going to use all the providers in our community. They were just hired as the navigators. They just happened to work for that company. But in order to make this work, we're going to need every treatment provider in our community that has capacity and resources, and it's the right fit for the person being deflected. Examples of compliance, two things that we were asked to do if we created a deflection program. What's compliance look like when someone's inside deflection? And then what's successful completion look like? So some examples of compliance, you're engaged with a provider. You're having better interactions with law enforcement. We see a decrease in criminal behavior. Some examples of successful completion, which myself and DA Perosa, we're still working on exactly what that would look like. If someone gets deflected, their case goes into what's called charges held in abeyance. It means they're not charged with the crime at the time of deflection, but police still document the interaction, write police reports, and turn them in. And that is held off to the side outside of the criminal justice system. And if somebody doesn't follow their treatment plan, if somebody continues to have poor interactions with law enforcement or continue to cause disruptions in the community, those charges could be filed against them and brought back into the court. So part of my job duties is to case manage the folks in deflection and really work hard to try to keep them in deflection so we don't have to put them on the other side of the criminal justice system. So some examples of successful completion: engage with a navigator in the LEAD program, treatment provider for a period of time. We've thrown around, is it 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? Big question mark right there. As we go, we're going to case manage this and we're going to learn as we go. I honestly think some people might be okay after a few weeks and some people might need 9 months. I want to be able to pivot with folks depending and meet them where they're at and just kind of figure out who needs those services. One thing I've learned, I've made my rounds around the county during the summer to try to go to all of our burn partners, treatment providers, find out who has capacity, and I'm learning they have so many services inside their organizations with peer support and wraparound services. Our housing contract has peer support and wraparound services. We're having navigators here. If we can get somebody in the system and keep them connected to resources, that's where we're going to be successful. And I think when we get folks there, how long do we need to keep them in deflection if I've got them connected to a treatment provider and they're getting services there and they're going there? And so we're going to kind of learn as we go with that one. So examples of successful completion: maybe your house, you're employed, continued decrease in criminal behavior, continued engagement and participation with the provider. One thing I saw in my law enforcement career, folks I would see in our community that were no longer coming to the jail, I would ask them, what'd you do? What changes did you make? Oftentimes they stopped using. And then when I'd see them come back to jail, same question, what happened? I started using again. And so 26, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I learned this. In the 90s, take drugs away, the criminality starts to decrease, and in many cases goes away. And so we're going to try to create that with this model. Okay, next slide. Who can be deflected? Measure 110 got us here. Reform with 110, making controlled substances criminal again. So we decided that the crimes that really are associated with substance use disorder and untreated mental health needs are low-level misdemeanor type crime. And so I wanted to, and so did the DA's office, we wanted to cast a wider net for folks that would be eligible for deflection than just drug possession. So we really looked at the quality of life crimes associated with substance use disorder and behavioral health needs. And examples of those crimes are trespassing, low-level theft, and possession of controlled substances. So our definition for who can be deflected, adults who live in Lane County, who have committed a low-level quality of life crime, and for whom it's suspected their behavior stems from an unmet behavioral health need or a co-occurring substance use disorder. And I'm going to turn this piece over to Greg.
All right. So the state of Oregon expects significant community engagement to take place in the development and the administration of this program. The grant applications, the documentation, the data tracking all require proof of partnership and engagement. So while Clint has been meeting with all 11 law enforcement agencies, all of the agencies attached to the 3 burns within Lane County, and as well as the tribes that are connected that have Lane County within their service district, we've also been having our own meetings. The Community Advisory Committee is our all-comers meeting, roughly 25 to 35 people, depending on the meeting. And by the way, with these committees, the numbers have grown over time as folks see the quality of the work, the importance of the work, the opportunity, the great opportunity this provides. So we're working with a Community Advisory Committee, meets once a month, but our Data and Evaluation Task Force and the DEI Task Force, Cultural Competency Task Force, they're meeting every 2 weeks to help us really drill down and have that focus. This work requires, we need to sign off with the state that the district attorneys involved, at least one law enforcement agency is involved. With Lane County, we can't stop at a single law enforcement agency. So we're working hard to get urban and rural partners there. Community mental health program, local mental health authorities involved. The burns, the behavioral health resource networks have to be involved, at least one. With 3, there's no way we can work with any single one. We're working with all 3. Peer support organizations, I would argue we're working with them all. Courts and local governmental bodies are included as well. Great participation from not only the circuit court, but the municipal courts. Tribal consultation has taken place, and it's an area where the tribal governments, behavioral health, and law enforcement are eager to learn what we're doing. And I think we're going to see some real opportunities for cooperation and collaboration. All of the work the state requires our effort be culturally and linguistically responsive, trauma-informed, and evidence-based. We can't do that in a vacuum designed here amongst county staff. We have to do this in the community. We've been doing that. It represents hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteer hours already coming into play as we design this work. I've had the honor to facilitate a number of those meetings to free Clint up to continue with his meetings. But the work is going well. You're likely to hear, when we hit road bumps, you're likely to hear also that folks are feeling they really have a voice at the table. So please, as you get comments, share them with us, and know that we are actively and enthusiastically engaging all of your constituents in this work.
All right. Data collection, that's a big part of House Bill 4002. The CJC directed the state to require data requirements of deflection programs, so we can really study the next year of what's working, what's not working, and kind of look at where we're coming up short or we're doing well. So the data, the required ones are the deflected participants, your demographic with your age and your race, the source of referral, and services provided. REDCap is the system that the state has built for everyone, that we were consistent. Client information will be uploaded into this system in real time as folks are deflected. This will allow the state to gather data in real time on counties with deflection programs around the state. In addition to the state data obligations, Lane County, we're developing specific county metrics to study these stats a little bit more internally so we can learn from our experience here and make sure we're serving people the best that we can. All right, our launch. So here's kind of just a run back over of where we've been over the last few months. So we'll be launching police agencies throughout the month of October. I didn't feel this program was like a light switch on a certain day. We just flip the switch and at midnight we go. This is a big shift, especially for law enforcement. We've never done this before. I've seen numerous people in my career that have gotten help and gotten treatment inside the criminal justice system and been successful. I'm excited to be part of this opportunity to do it on the outside of the criminal justice system. We know it works, and so, but that's new for law enforcement. It's new for all of us to figure out how to do that. And it's super important that when we launch it out, we do it right. Throughout the summer and into the fall, District Attorney Chris Perosa and myself met with leadership from our local police agencies and walked through what deflection services would entail and engaged with them in what this could look like in each of their areas. I should also back up on that one too. One of the first meetings we had, we met with leadership from all of our police agencies to find out if they wanted us to go with the lead model. If they like the lead model, would they buy into the lead model? Again, this only works if police deflect people. So I wanted to make sure that we build the system that they're gonna use and that they would buy into. So we're kind of taking a systematic approach to building this in each community. Every community in Lane County is unique in its own way. And we're also a big county. We have 4,700 square miles, 11 agencies. Most lead models that you learn about from around the nation started with like one police agency, one or two city blocks, and started this lead model of really trying to do that. Ours is coming out of a House bill. Ours came out of, as of September 1st, drugs are criminal again. So we didn't think we could just do it with one law enforcement agency. We want to do it countywide. So we discussed the possibility of using technology. We want to have someone that gets deflected, that navigator is going to respond out and work with law enforcement in the field to have a conversation with that person and talk to them about deflection. I don't know anyone that can get from here to Blue River in less than an hour, hour and a half. And then you look at the weather that we have in Lane County. So most of our navigators are probably going to reside in the metro area, Springfield, Eugene, probably not in those rural areas. So we got to really get outside the box of how do we serve our community. So we've been engaging law enforcement with, do we use technology, like a FaceTime type interview? Do we use phones? Do we have a central drop-off location? I'm working on that with the housing component, where navigators could meet law enforcement at a central location point, maybe in Eugene, and have these conversations. But in order for this to work, and a lot of our rural police departments have one officer on at night, maybe two on a really like heavy shift of staffing. And so Eugene Police is the biggest police agency we have in our community. They look different than Florence, than Cottage Grove, than Oak Ridge, State Police. So we're really just taking an approach to work with each one of our police agencies to do it right for them. And as the navigators come on board, we'll continue these talks with law enforcement leadership and custom build this for each one of our communities. Right now, what we're doing is we're currently making our way around the county to meet with, which I thought this was super important too, law enforcement line level officers and law enforcement leadership with Ideal Option. The navigators that have come on, I'm taking them with me, and we're going to briefings, and we're going to in-services, and we're talking to line level officers about deflection, what it looks like, what the resources and the tools we've built for them to be able to use this, and allow them to have some question and answer time to the folks that are going to be doing the navigation, as well as me, and what to expect from this entire process, because this is new for them. They're excited, they're eager, they have lots of questions, but it's a confusing kind of process as well, too, because they've never done it before. So as we get in front of agencies and as Ideal Options hires and onboards navigators, both sides, we'll launch when both sides are ready and feel comfortable when we can begin deflecting folks. When law enforcement leadership feels comfortable within their agency, the navigators feel like they can handle it, we'll launch that agency. My goal is to have everybody up and running throughout the month of October with deflection services in our community. And I got to give a big shout out to Ideal Option. I don't know anyone that can fill positions any place in a matter of weeks like they did. And I've got navigators that I've known for years that have left other agencies to come do this work with law enforcement because they were in this situation at one time, and they're very passionate about doing this work. So we lucked out there because I know a lot of places have job openings for months that they can't fill. If we didn't fill these, we wouldn't be able to have this model that we have going on.
Do you want me to do the ongoing?
Yes, sir.
All right, so there's still a lot of work to do. Part of it is the systems mapping, really understanding what the resources are, where they are. No one has the holistic picture of how all of this interacts. And we've got a lot of interest in helping us do that mapping. There will be DEI training for system partners, and that's the focus. Initial focus was on law enforcement because every officer, whether they're on at midday or 2 a.m., is going to be able to make that individual decision about does this individual get deflected or does this individual go into the justice system. That is an awesome responsibility, and everyone, including the officer, wants to make sure that there's a solid call. There's good reasons for that decision. So there's a real interest in seeing not just law enforcement systems, but also the treatment providers. We have data that shows that some of our programs are working better for some ethnicities than others, one gender better than the other. There's just a need to be attentive to all of the system partners in this process. We are focusing on the rural communities. To some extent, it's an easier lift. It will be, and our data from September showed this, it will be, the majority of calls are going to be metropolitan, with a significant majority of them being within the city of Eugene. But we're seeing the sheriff's office, Oak Ridge, Cottage Grove, having contacts where there could be deflection. So this needs to work everywhere, and we're going to pay attention to that. And then continuing to work with the Burns, with House Bill 4002, and what it did was it recriminalized possession of drugs. All of the dollars should still be flowing into the Burns to build up a robust treatment provision system. We really need to pay attention to ensure that those services remain, because this is not going to work without treatment that is very quick, it's immediate, and meets the needs of the client. And with that, I think we're done with our presentation and ready for your thoughts and questions.
Great, thank you. I will turn it over to the board, but first I'll just say, Clint, you're doing retirement wrong, and we're really glad for that. So, it's great to have you here in this role. To the board, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Riley, for all of your work. I've been a fan of your work since we first met, I think, at a jail tour when I first started. And know that this is really meaningful to you, and it shows in everything that you do. And excited that we have somebody like you working on this program in Lane County. So thank you for continuing on after the sheriff's office with us to do this. Really, really appreciated. And I know that what you're doing is likely going to be a model for other areas in the state, as everybody is trying to pursue this new program. And there's so much optimism with what the potential could be to help people in this situation. And knowing that we have such low staffing levels in our sheriff's office on patrol at any given point in time, I know that they often have to weigh which calls that they go to, and they go to some of the more high crime calls. And knowing that this is for low-level quality of life crimes, I'm wondering what you think, statistically speaking, like, are they gonna be able to interact with the people that could really be most helped by this program if they're going often to these calls that those kind of crimes may not qualify for this program? So, I mean, I know that they will, but I'm just thinking overall, big picture, like, how are we gonna be able to make sure that we are getting people into this program that need help when we may be called to things beyond this level?
I think that's a good question. That's a good question for the sheriff specifically, but I know like in rural Lane County, they respond to life safety calls. So calls that Eugene police are responding to probably don't look like sheriff's office calls. And so a lot of the low level, the sheriff's office probably isn't able to get to because they're going to life safety calls from the coast to the mountains to back and forth through the metro area. I would guess the River Road area would be a high area for that low level stuff that the sheriff's office might be going to. Eugene Police, Springfield Police, your bigger agencies. So I think that challenge is there. And then do they even respond to some of those calls right now just based on their staffing levels? And so as we got together with leadership at the beginning of the summer, we kind of were talking about how often would agencies use deflection based on their call load, and this came up of like what kind of calls do each agency respond to and what do their staffing levels look like.
So as a follow-up, is it only the sheriffs that can refer to the deflection, or what about like SPD, EPD? Are these other ones able to also refer?
Oh, great question. Yeah, this is for all 11 agencies countywide. So we put this together for all police agencies.
Okay.
And so,
And
yes.
that might resolve some of my questions about who is interacting with those that qualify.
Yeah. And so if I was confusing when I did the presentation, I meant, yes, this is for countywide, all law enforcement agencies.
Thank
you.
Chair Traeger, Commissioner Buck, just real quickly, we did have a chance to look at the data from the month of September. And there was, I want to say, 116 arrests made for possession of a controlled substance. Of those 116, I want to say 6 or 8 of those were sheriff's office arrests. The vast majority were the city of Eugene, but they were literally across the board. So certainly Springfield was represented, Cottage Grove, Florence, all of the law enforcement partners, except for maybe, I don't think the University of Oregon was in there. But when we come before you in the future, we'll undoubtedly be bringing with us Courtney Runkle, a paralegal from the district attorney's office who is crunching the numbers for us, has that data, and it's the kind of thing we'll present. As you know, the law changed on September 1st, so getting this program up as quickly as we can without compromising the true nature of the program is critical. It's giving us a chance to see a little bit of that data. Those individuals that can be diverted within the justice system will be diverted within the justice system, but it's given us a foray about what our numbers might look like.
One thing I would add to that, 100 and some odd arrests, maybe 50% of those were deflection eligible, because a lot of those drug possessions were felony type crime associated with the drug possession. So we're just looking at the data right now so that we kind of have an idea of forecasting what Courtney and I's workload is going to look like whenever we start deflection and who would have been eligible. Also, I've been telling police agencies too, the hardest people to deal with in the communities and the hardest arrests they make are our deflection criteria. Folks that have mental health disorders, substance use disorder, trespass, disorderly, those are the hardest folks to deal with in the criminal justice system. And a lot of those folks are right on the edge of becoming violent and aggressive, and oftentimes those turn into assault on a public safety officer. So we've cast the net for our deflection criteria to serve those folks, but also knowing those are the most difficult folks for our law enforcement personnel to deal with.
Well, and I would just say, I mean, hard to deal with, but also least helped by. I mean, that is not what's going to help them. So this is great. Thank you. Before I move on to the next commissioner, Sarah, thanks for supporting the presentation. Could I ask you to just take the PowerPoint down just so Metro has a fuller view? Thank you. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Trigger. You know, before I talk about you a little bit, Clint, I'm going to not bury my lead and go directly to something that you said. The lead in this is, if we don't have housing in place, and I filled in the blanks, for the people who are being deflected, that we don't have tools to do our job. We have to focus all of our attention on making certain that we have those beds, those front doors, those safe places for people to be. Otherwise, how can you do your job? And you've illustrated that very, very clearly. But Chair, I'd first like to point out something that I told Sarah earlier on today about Clint. I was invited to do a presentation to the Oregon Psychiatric Physicians Association. Daunting. And I asked you if you'd come and join me to do that. And you came and you made the presentation. And about 3 minutes into the presentation, I was non-existent. And Clint was presenting on the FIT team and on our responses, not just in the jail, but throughout the county. And they basically carried you out on their shoulders. And I was there just waving and basking in the glow. Because of the presentation that you made, it gave me a great deal of confidence, Clint, in the work that you're doing right now. Confidence in your abilities, confidence in your ability to extrapolate and draw conclusions and bring assets to the table that really are beyond what we would even expect. And I think you have a good team in place. I'm really looking forward to the work that, Chair, there's so much we could say about this because of the presentation, but it's in its infancy, so to speak. But I would like to point out that for me personally, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, is the more I'm on the job as a county commissioner, the more I realize how much there is to know and how much I can glean knowledge, information from people doing the work like you, and like Sarah, and like James Jewell and Andre Braniff and Kate Budd in the back of the room. You're the ones doing the work. What we do is provide you the framework and the resources to do the work. Keep doing it. You mentioned Ideal Option, and you mentioned the fact that we're working closely with the Burns and making sure that their resources are coordinated and woven into our resources. Some of us were afraid of that in the first place, you know, afraid that these resources should go to the county, not to private organizations that are now operating as the consolidated Burns. But it's working, isn't it? We're finding ways to really make things work in a fashion that we would not be able to do without them. And you know, to look in, excuse me, I'm choking up a bit. In particular, at Ideal Option and the work that they're doing, bringing in peer counselors, bringing in all of their resources to really do an effective job to the people on the street and to the people who you have described as the hardest folks to deal with, the people who meet the deflection criteria. Nothing more I'm going to say other than encouragement for the work that's being done and a close eye on how it moves forward. Keep the board informed as to how we can be a resource for you. And Sarah, thanks for being here. Thanks for having that short little chat with me, because it reminded me how good of an operator Clint is. And I'll always call you Captain. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Seneca.
Thanks. Yes, as we're all heaping praise on Captain Riley here, we also have to thank Greg Rickoff. We were in the Public Safety Coordinating Committee, and he said, "Who do you think talked him into doing this?" So, thanks, Mr. Rickoff. A lot of the questions I have are the questions we all have. We're waiting. We're going to sort these out as we go. What I really did like is when you talked about meeting with the line level, because I have heard some concerns in our rural communities. You know, the unknowns. We don't know how this deflection is going to work. When you were speaking with the line level, what kind of feeling did you get? Was it excitement? Are they going to deflect? Or are they going to say we don't understand and kind of go hands off? What are your thoughts on that?
No, law enforcement's excited to get a new tool to deal with the folks that we're talking about here. They've been dealing with them for a long time, and it seems like we have an emergency room in our community and a jail. And to have more tools for them, police want to help people. That's why they got into police work to begin with. And so they're excited to have a new tool. Law enforcement people like to follow the law and follow rules, and they just want to make sure that when they deflect someone that they're at the point they can make that decision. It's a discretionary call that law enforcement gets to make. And so them getting their heads around when you can deflect and when you should arrest and when you should take someone to jail, they just need the clear direction of when to use the tool and how to use it. And to let someone go with a peer navigator. A police officer's never arrested someone and then had somebody come out in that capacity and take the person away. You know, so questions are, what if they run from the peer navigator? What if they escape? What if they're no longer in custody and they're going with that person? But that's a very good question for someone that wants to keep our community safe, and they've never done something like that before. And once they go with the peer navigator, they're building that relationship with the navigator, and their charges are held in abeyance, and the police officer's okay to move on to their next call, and that person's okay. But the more we're talking with them, the more I'm learning. Police chief shared with me, over 50% of most departments have never made a drug arrest in their career. They are that new on the department. So Lane County-wide, 50% of our law enforcement folks came on after 2020. Many people retired during these times. And so starting back, Chris Perosa's office is doing basic training on drug investigations and drug arrests and drug crimes. And so this is kind of new for a lot of folks, and we're throwing this new tool at them. So no, I haven't gotten any resistance, more just trying to get a good idea of when to use it and how to use it. And then are we going to have enough capacity with these navigators to serve 4,700 square miles, 11 agencies, and are we going to run out? We don't want our police officers waiting for someone in deflection for hours and hours and hours on end too for a navigator. And there's just so many unknowns until we launch. What's that workload going to look like?
Right, yeah. I mean, those are the questions we all have, right?
Yeah.
One thing I really did like was staying flexible, nimble, and pivoting on deflection times. I think that's going to be a huge game changer when you're allowed to kind of make the call on the fly. And when you were talking about that, my thought was, well, you mentioned the crimes will kind of be held in limbo as they're going through deflection. How long will those crimes, is that another date that's going to be kind of flexible also, or how does that work?
That was my 3 to 6 to 9 month scenario that I gave you. And myself and Chris Perosa, we've talked at length about that. If we can deflect someone away from almost getting arrested to a treatment door and they're engaging, how long do we hold this low-level misdemeanor crime over their head while they're in deflection if they're engaged and they're taking treatment? And so I think we have to evaluate if we've got them effectively to another door and they're doing well. I think we can probably call that success and move on. And like I've told lots of recovery is a lifetime journey. And so if somebody stumbles 9 months later, we do it again. We just look at what is the totality of the situation at the time, and can we deflect again? But I know many people in my work life and personal life that struggle with addiction, that stumble. And I think deflection needs to be nimble enough to look at people that are stumbling and then reassess, but also this isn't probation or parole where someone's held in abeyance forever and forever. And the more we can get someone to a treatment door, then that's where we open up capacity to serve more people too. And so.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Clint, sing your praises. You're doing a great job. Sarah, thank you for all you do and for all the people. I think what's really important that I heard today is that you're creating more answers to the questions that we can't even ask yet, which I appreciate that leadership. You're engaging with people, the Burns, you're bringing a team on. I mean, you're doing everything that every leadership book I've ever read teaches people to do. So congratulations on doing that. Personally, I just want to share something that I think is really important about what you said. You said we have an emergency room and a jail, and this is another tool. And I don't want to berate my story, but I want to tell you from a community standpoint, from parents that have lived through this and lived through these experiences, that this tool is going to give people hope. It's going to change the community. It's going to allow people that do low-level crimes that have mental illness, that at an age where they can't be civilly committed, a loved one can't advocate them entirely. You're woken up in the middle of the night and you're trying to find them in a parking lot near a bus station, or they're being released at 2 a.m. from an emergency room into the darkness and they dart away when you start to make a conversation. There is nothing that families can do, and this is a great source of hope. You mentioned that, sorry. You mentioned that You mentioned that the quality of life is not just for the offenders, but I want to say it's for the families and for the loved ones advocating and standing in the gap for those that are troubled and especially in light of those, like I said, those civil commitment hurdles. So this program to me is not only a lifeline, it's a great idea, and I can't imagine why 13 counties in the state didn't want to do that. Maybe they're just not as on the ball as we are. But I want to also congratulate you for the partnership that you have with Steve Yamamori with Reveille. He called me a year or two ago, kicking and screaming, wanted me to be on the board, and I'm like, God, I got so much to do, but I'm so glad that I'm on that board, and those guys are an organization that's really, really wonderful to work with. They're proactive. They find housing. They grill me to my nth degree about real estate stuff, and so we have a great partnership working, and I think that's just a great organization. And like you said, if there's not somewhere for those people to go in the moment, it's a failed system. And so that is key to that. So I'm really grateful that you're doing that. And just let me say finally that the attraction of the navigators in just a few weeks is all about you. It's all about your reputation, your dedication, your passion, your professionalism. It's all about duty, honor, and character. And that, sir, you have abundance of it. I thank you for that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Everything that's been said. I have just a couple of, just in the interest of time, just practical questions. And thank you for mentioning Reveille. They are a phenomenal organization, and I must have misunderstood, or maybe they've evolved since I first met with and toured. I thought they were exclusively working on veterans housing, or is that just a focus?
Once I met Steve and told him the project I was working on, he quickly realized there was a gap and a need, and he wanted to be part of Deflection.
Great. That's great. On the law enforcement response, engagement, training, you mentioned state police kind of in passing, but they're not technically part of Deflection, or are they? What's that?
They will be. Yeah, we're going to have them equipped. They're hard to track down. There's very few of them. And so myself and DA Perosa, they're still on our list to meet with their commander here in the next couple of weeks, but some of their troopers have been coming. They've been working together with the trainings that we've been doing, and agencies have been jumping in on other agencies as we go around.
Fantastic.
So no, we'll have them up and running, and they'll be able to deflect.
Great. This is more a comment, but you can affirm it. And also for people watching too, we keep saying Burns Behavioral Health Resource Network. So they're constellations of organizations doing treatment and peer support and navigation. But none of this changes, it doesn't change at the dispatch level, right? Dispatch still, if it's a law enforcement is who's dispatched, law enforcement is dispatched, and then it's at that moment at the street level response that the decision is made whether deflection is appropriate. Is that right?
It'll be the officer with a phone number calling out the on-call navigator. Great.
And yeah, to Vice Chair's point, when you said ER or jail, this is a new tool. I mean, what I'm so excited about, I'm looking forward to a board meeting a year from now and 2 years from now when we look back and see what's really looks different when we have a stabilization center, when we've been doing deflection for a while, when our mobile crisis is fully deployed and integrated with other street response in the different communities that we serve across the county. This really is a vital piece of a systems change and a system level response, because it goes more, it's not only the tool, it is that training and that culture of how law enforcement addresses the issue on the street when there's all these co-occurring problems of behavioral health, addiction, coupled with criminal activity. And so the more, as you said, they want to help people, so the more they can help people and then work on addressing the criminality as its own unique, this is very exciting. Our next item up is talking about our response in homeless services. And I love that we use the word system response in our agenda item for that. So very excited for this piece of the system. The last question I have is, you mentioned the data collection system at the state level, but the county's going to develop, we're developing our own metrics. Will there be a public-facing dashboard or something like that, the way we do with a lot of our other in time, so the general public can see?
Chair Trigger, that is absolutely the plan. Yes.
Great, fantastic.
And we probably need to have a conversation at some point about when do we come back before you?
That was my last question, is when is the right time, how much progress and what kind of time can be made to be.
I just wanted to add one more thing too, that it's super important. I've been telling all the law enforcement agencies this too, as we look around the state, the 23 models for deflection, they're all different. 23 models were different. And so I've asked the law enforcement guys, as they network around the state and talk to their colleagues from other agencies, let's not vicariously live through someone's successes or failures around the state. When someone tells you something's working or not working, look at the model we built here in Lane County and then compare that to the model that was built where they're at as you compare what's working, what's not working. And that happens a lot, but we've set the resources in place, I think, to hit all the spots, to go down the path of being successful.
Yeah, and I think for Lane County, I know, because we've talked a lot, and then we had the presentation, our District 5 meeting across 3 different counties, each handling it a little differently. It's about how much resource you get to do it. I mean, you have to have the resource to match the program you want to stand up, and you can't stand the program up without the resources. So hopefully this will also help inform our partners in the legislature about resource allocation and what really works and what kind of outcomes they get for their investments, so that it starts shifting their thinking about where and how to allocate those dollars, and our federal partners for that matter, over time. So thank you. Yeah, I love everybody wants to go to the what if this problem and what if that problem, and this is sort of and what if it works? Yeah. Here's what it will look like. What if, right? So,
Trigger, to answer your question, I think probably late spring might be a good time. We will be presenting materials. The Criminal Justice Commission is the state agency that's working with this. There will be attention given to this during the legislative long session. Perhaps we bring you our report and what we plan to share, so you see at that time what we'll be sharing with the legislature.
great. So like a 6 months out.
6 months out.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else from staff before we conclude the item?
Thank you all so much for the kind comments. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. Great. Right. Moving along, we are in, we do have an order. Look at that. Thank you.
We do need to do something for you.
Did you? Yeah, we do have a board order. We'll actually make it official. Vice Chair.
Chair, I'd like to move to approve one grant and accept $1,170,540 from the Criminal Justice Commission for the Behavioral Health Deflection Program, and delegate authority to the county administrator to execute the award documents and any subcontracts as per order 24100803.
I'll second.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Any discussion to the motion? Great. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-10-08-03, approving one grant and accepting $1,170,000, $1,170,540 from the CJC as presented. Thank you so much. Right. That was important and great, and in the interest of time, moving right along to Health and Human Services, we have a brief item that would have been on our consent calendar. Commissioner Buck?
Yes, for item 8A, I am going to recuse myself for a conflict of interest since this involves St. Vincent de Paul, and I'm related to the Executive Director Emeritus, who is still employed with that agency. So I will excuse myself, go into the hall, and if somebody could let me in when you're done, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Commissioner Buck is exiting, as I mentioned, this would ordinarily have been on our consent calendar, so I'm assuming there's not much to it, but to take a motion.
Chair, I move to approve one contract amendment with St. Vincent de Paul and delegating authority to the county administrator or the designee to sign the agreement as per order 24100804.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Senega. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Buck recused. And we will have her come back in and move on to item 8B, which is Order 24-10-08-05 in the matter of approving contract actions with Whitebird, the Oregon Health Authority, Benton County, and looks like Zach is here in Director Gray's stead, serving double duty as door monitor. So I'll just welcome you to introduce the item. This also is a brief item this morning.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Zach Evans, Finance Manager for Health and Human Services.
So this second item today, it's very standard business for us. The first item is a contract with Whitebird focused on street outreach funded by All-In Dollars. So another opportunity to get all-in money into our community. The second two amendments, it's standard funding from the Oregon Health Authority for Public Health. And we, Lane County Environmental Health operates the Food Handlers website. So the next one is an agreement with Benton County to have some of those licenses go through that website.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the board or a motion?
Chair, I'd like to move to approve contract actions with Whitebird, Oregon Health Authority, Benton County, and delegating authority to the county administrator or the designee to sign the approved actions per Board Order 24100805.
Is there a second? Thank you. It's been moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Any discussion to the motion? Questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Approval of Order 24-110-08-05 in the matter of approving contracts with Whitebird, Oregon Health Authority, Benton County, and delegating authority to the administrator or their designee to sign the approved actions. Thank you. And are you, thank you, Zach. Yeah, did you have another item with us?
I was going to introduce Kate Budd, who's the Health and Human Services Division Manager for the next item.
Thank you. This is a report only as our regular update and report on our homeless response system. And Kate Budd, I will have you introduce the rest of the panel and take us down this journey.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for having us today. We have an opportunity to hear from Andrea Braniff, who is our Coordinated Entry and Outreach Supervisor. Andrea has been with us for about 2 years and has a rich history of working with individuals who are houseless through street outreach locally and in a number of states. We also have James Ewell, who is our Homelessness and Community Action Manager. James is actually celebrating his 4th year with Lane County this week, and so we're very pleased to have him to share the great work coming out of his team.
Sure that's on. All right. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us here to present today. Excited to share the outcomes that have been met by the various programs operating in the last fiscal year related to homelessness services. And then we'll pass along to Andrea to talk about the diversion program in particular, as I think you'll see some of the details of that program are really exciting. So in the last fiscal year, we had 24 different agencies operating 76 different program types, which really shows the robust nature of the homelessness services that we have available in our community. I'm going to get into more detail of each program type as I get to those individual slides, but these slides represent homelessness prevention, community service centers, food security programs, street outreach, housing navigation, diversion, emergency shelter, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing. The outcomes that you're going to see are largely influenced by the HUD system performance measures, so they're required outcomes that programs funded with HUD dollars need to meet. In addition, there's also some community action agency national performance indicators which influence the outcomes that you'll see. So we're going to start with our prevention assistance programs. So we have 11 prevention programs that span across 10 agencies, which are listed there on the left. As I'm going through these slides, you'll see the green stars indicate that although there was a reduction this fiscal year, both last year and this year, they exceeded 100% of the outcome goal. So although there's a reduction, we would still obviously consider that a success as they are over 100% of their goal. Prevention assistance programs, also sometimes referred to as homelessness prevention, are time-limited rent assistance and rent arrearages payment programs. They also provide some supportive services for households to help them gain stability. And again, really the goal is for households to be able to receive limited time assistance to then stabilize to not have to enter into the homelessness services systems later on. Next are our community service and access centers. We have 10 programs across 7 agencies. Community service and access centers are really a key part in our system as they act as an entry point for households and a way for those households to access basic needs support. This can include food, financial assistance, healthcare, hygiene, clothing, and navigation to housing. We have specific community access centers that serve specific populations, which include those experiencing domestic violence, youth, the Latinx community, those who are unhoused, and it spans across the full geographic region of our county, so those in the southwest and east of the county, as well as our metropolitan areas. The community needs assessment, which you all likely are familiar with as it's been presented to you before in the past, is really what influences the programming for our community service and access centers. So the results of that community needs assessment help us to identify where there may be missing pieces to our services. And an example would be this year we, through an RFP for the community needs assessment, we identified a need for childcare supports that was not occurring, as well as medical and dental assistance. As you can see, these programs were incredibly successful this last fiscal year, increasing their outcomes by 24% and serving over 17,000 households. The next programs to highlight are our food security programs. We have four programs spread across 3 agencies: Food for Lane County, Lane Council of Governments, and the Upper Willamette CDC. Food security programs focus on food distribution to individuals across the county, and this can look like emergency food pantries or food box sites. Meals are also provided via Meals on Wheels and at the Food for Lane County dining room. And want to highlight we do have a program in Oak Ridge to serve individuals in East County. Again, as you will see, which is really a pattern with many of these outcomes, is there was an increase this year. So with the target goal of number of households receiving assistance, we saw an increase there, as well as individuals who received a meal by exceeding the outcome of 25%. And again, with that star just indicating both last year and this year, they exceeded their goal over 100%. So our community action programs, we have 2 community action programs that are one operated by Pearl Buck Center and one operated by the Relief Nursery. Community action programs are focused on child and family supports, which can include education, in-home outreach, child abuse prevention. As you will see, we did see a reduction of 23% in meeting the outcomes this year for these programs. We have heard from both of those providers that there were staffing challenges, which Clint mentioned in his presentation, which is not a surprise, I know, to you all, that there have been challenges in staffing across the board for social service agencies. We do take into account these reductions of in programs meeting their outcomes when we plan for the next fiscal year, and we do some right sizing of programming, which I'll talk about on a subsequent slide. But I will highlight, they did continue to serve, they served 38 households in these programs, which is obviously 38 households that were provided really critical supports. Next are our street outreach programs. Currently, we have 5 street outreach programs that are among 4 agencies. Street outreach is really about building engagement with unsheltered individuals, identifying and breaking down barriers, focusing largely on housing navigation and connection to housing resources. But it's also relational in that providing basic needs to help build those relationships so that we can then engage folks in deeper conversations about getting things like physical and behavioral health needs met, and again, connecting to housing. We currently have teams that are spread across the full geographic region of Lane County, which includes in our rural areas. Andrea oversees our internal rural outreach team, which focuses heavily in Florence, Veneta, and partners with the HIV Alliance program that works in those other areas. We did, so we saw an increase in households served this year, but we did see a decrease relating to health focus in our street outreach programs. In talking with providers, I think one key piece is that although the last item on your agenda was approving new funding for an outreach program, we have overall seen a reduction in funding for street outreach programs, especially in the last fiscal year, which largely likely led to this reduction reduction. There also has been much more of a shift and a focus on housing navigation with street outreach, so really wanting to connect folks to housing directly from unsheltered homelessness. And because of that, that could have led to a reduction in those health outcomes being met. And then finally, HIV Alliance has been doing incredible work. All of our street outreach providers have been doing incredible work, and it's often, one piece of the larger work that they're doing. And going back to those staffing challenges that I meant, sometimes that spreads, or that I mentioned, sometimes that spreads staff thin at these projects, which can result in a reduction of some of these outcomes being made. But again, impressive numbers from our street outreach programs again this year. So housing navigation in our alternative shelters, we have one of these types of programs that's currently at community-supported shelters. Housing navigation, very similar to street outreach, is that building relationships through consistent engagement, identifying and breaking down those barriers to housing, and then conducting housing assessments and navigation connections. Again, an increase in both of the outcome measurements for these programs this year, an increase of 22% in the number of individuals that were receiving targeted housing navigation services, and then an increase of 8%, which is really impressive. 43% of the individuals engaged in these programs were exited to stable housing options or indoor placements, which can include temporary or permanent housing. Andrea, as I mentioned, is going to get more into diversion in her presentation, but really want to highlight an increase of over 200% in our diversion program. So we served over 676 households this last fiscal year through diversion. Again, I'll leave Andrea to get really into the details, but diversion is about being a creative housing problem-solving intervention, and it's really what should be occurring at the start of if you look at the homeless services system, it's the intervention right at the beginning. I also want to just highlight that our diversion program is largely operated by one staff member, and so just makes it even more incredible that the work that they've been able to do, and with Andrea's guidance. So emergency shelters and transitional housing programs, we have 9. I will highlight that these, I should have said this at the beginning, these outcomes do not include the all-in programs just because there are different outcome measurements for our COC funded programs. I'm going to touch on all-in on a future slide, but do want to clarify that. So this report is covering 9 emergency shelter programs that are spread across 3 providers. We did see an overall increase in households accessing services this year. We saw a slight increase of 2% in utilization. So our nightly shelter average utilization rate is 84%, which is up 2%. There's a variety of reasons why you might see turnover in a shelter on a given night, some of which I'll get into when I discuss the NAV Center a little bit later. We did see a slight decrease in exits to housing this year, a decrease of 4%. That likely has ties to the housing market, the tight housing market that we're all aware of. The ability to get folks into housing can be a challenge, so we need to continue to work on those pathways to housing. And this year saw exciting increases in our youth homelessness demonstration projects, or our YHDP projects, which is funding that we received. I believe we're now in the 2nd year of that funding. YHDP programs involve 3 different program types. One is a host home program for youth and young adults, which operates similar to foster placements. It's where youth are placed with host homes where they can reside while they're working on permanency. We also fund street outreach projects through our YHDP program, and then a joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing program type, which is really focused on quickly housing youth and young adults into time-limited housing so that there can be case management and other supports provided to move them into permanency as quickly as possible. As you can see, we saw significant increases this last fiscal year in both of the outcomes for our YHDP projects, which I do think is really just a testament to the ongoing efforts of those providers, as well as the technical assistance that has been provided by Kirsten London, who's our staff that focuses on YHDP projects. Really just seeing momentum as these programs start to just really develop the work that they're doing. So it's exciting to see. Rapid rehousing programs. Rapid rehousing programs, also referred to sometimes as RRH, are time-limited rent assistance programs and rent arrearages programs that focus on supportive services. Again, looking to provide stabilizing supports, connecting folks to resources. Rapid rehousing differs from permanent supportive housing, which I'll touch on next, in that it's meant to be more of a short-term intervention to provide stability for households who are homeless, to get them rehoused quickly and get them to a point where they can maintain that housing over time. Although we saw a decrease of 6% this year in the number of individuals exiting to permanent housing from rapid rehousing, both the previous year and last year, we were over 100%. So 83% of individuals accessing rapid rehousing programs exit to then permanent housing, which is really an exciting goal. Exact same number, but was an increase this year of 17%. We saw 83% of those enrolled households maintain or increase their income through benefits, earned income, or a combination of both. Having operated a rapid rehousing program in the past, I will say that particular outcome has been very challenging, especially with the economy that we're in. So again, a real testament to the work that our 9 providers have done in those rapid rehousing projects. Permanent supportive housing, just want to give you a look at utilization of vouchers. So the HUD VASH, which is a program through Homes for Good that focuses on veterans, our permanent supportive housing scattered site programs. So scattered sites differ from our project-based sites like MLK Commons, the Nell, and Keystone, in that they are supporting folks with getting permanent housing in the community. So folks reside in scattered site apartments or other housing across the community, rather than having a site-based project like the Commons. As you will see, there is a little bit of vouchers in progress that were left over from the last fiscal year. That's common. This is still a good utilization rate, especially with the site-based projects. There's turnover. When there's turnover in units, sometimes there's maintenance that needs to be done. With the scattered site projects, they still have to be able to find units that will rent to tenants, and that's becoming ever more challenging just with a tight housing market. And so, this still shows a success in the utilization of these vouchers overall. More on the PSH, or permanent supportive housing projects. We have 6 programs across 4 agencies. As I mentioned, PSH really differs from our other interventions, that it's really an intensive engagement and supports. It's meant to be permanent or long-term. It's really for those households that are most vulnerable in our homeless services system. PSH programs focus on connecting folks to peer behavioral health and physical health supports, and then increase community supports for residents that are involved in those programs. Again, saw really great outcomes from PSH programs this last fiscal year. 85% of participants maintained permanent housing and did not exit the program. 79%, which was an increase of 38% from last year, maintained or increased their income, which is incredible. And also, I mentioned that PSH in its name is, can provide permanent supports. We still, whenever possible, would love to see households be able to move on to no longer need those supports. And so to see that so many households maintained or increased their income is really a exciting opportunity for those households to move on from PSH. And then one of what I think is just an incredible outcome that was met was we saw the average wait to get into PSH housing be 37 days. When you look at the previous 2 fiscal years, that reduction is monumental. That is time households are spent experiencing homelessness. And so to see a reduction that significantly means it's less traumatic for those households that are experiencing homelessness. And again, would highlight the work of Andrea's team, the Coordinated Entry Outreach team, who really focuses on providing navigation and document collection supports for the households that get referred to these programs, which has greatly cut down on the bottleneck we have previously seen where a household gets referred to one of these PSH projects, and then they have to collect all of the documents they're going to need. So their ID, their verification of disability, their verification of homelessness. Andrea's team has really done incredible work to start collecting those materials ahead of time, which has, as you see, greatly reduced the time folks have had to wait to get into that housing. So again, the outcomes this year, really exciting. As you know, the majority of them were increases, just some slight decreases, which I think are symptomatic of some larger just system challenges that we faced. As we look to the new fiscal year, we really took a collaborative approach with our grantees, you know, wanting to find out from them what's working, what's not working, how can we create outcomes and outputs together that you know, are realistic, but also meet the needs of our community and the expectations of the funding. We continue to provide biannual program and fiscal monitoring of the programs that we fund, which really provides an opportunity to provide technical assistance to those projects, which I think has really been critical in ensuring that they're set up to be as successful as possible. This upcoming year, we're really focusing on hosting some best practices trainings. We've heard loud and clear from our providers that training is a challenge for them, both financially and just capacity-wise. So we recently, in the last month, surveyed our providers to get an idea of what training topics are of priority to them, and we're going to work to get those trainings set up, either having our own local experts present on those or bringing in some national experts on those topics as well. And then really focusing, and you'll hear more about this when I talk about the PHB strategic planning, but making sure that providers, all the way down from leadership to those line staff, know the role that their program plays in our larger system. There are many moving pieces in this system, and all of them play a really key part in ending homelessness, and so we want to make sure that every single staff member who's working on these projects understands that role. And then really focusing finally on data-informed decision-making. So, you know, looking at outcomes like these, looking at other data points to see where are there areas we need to improve, where are there areas we need to focus on, what project types are doing really well and what's leading them to do so well, and can we, you know, take pieces of that, of those successful programs and help to build stronger supports for some of those programs that may be challenged in meeting some of their outcomes. So highlighting the all-in round 2 outcome goals, as you may remember, the round 1 outcomes that were laid out by the governor's office were a little bit more prescribed than we've seen in round 2, so they're not quite as specific. The goal for round 2 is to maintain 304 round 1 shelter beds that were created, 14 of which are medical respite beds. We want to rehouse 110 households via diversion, which, as you saw on the previous slide, you know, we exceeded that significantly last fiscal year, so I would assume we will exceed that again significantly this year. Maintaining or obtaining housing for 130 households through the Long-Term Rent Assistance Program, or LTRA. That's a program that is focused on round 1 households that were housed via All-In to provide them longer-term supports. If there is turnover, we then refer households from the coordinated entry wait list as well. So that's the maintaining for round 1 households or obtaining for any new households. We're also looking to provide housing stabilization supports to 453 households through homelessness prevention programs. And then through our encampment-focused outreach project, which has moved from being operated by HIV Alliance over to being operated by Whitebird, we're looking to transition 20% of the unsheltered households that they engage with to indoor emplacements, which could include into shelters as well as other housing, whether temporary or permanent. But the goal would be that then 30% of those placements would go into a permanent housing setting.
Nice, just clarifying, so 30% of the 20%?
Correct.
Thank
30% of the 20%, yep. So that was it for the outcomes. I'm going to keep us moving. Happy to, we'll have time for questions at the end, but I want to make sure we cover this piece as well. So we, as those of you who are involved more closely with the PHB likely know, we have been focusing on a strategic planning effort with the Poverty and Homelessness Board over the last, it's been several months now, but things are starting to really heat up with that work. So just to give some context as to why we're working on a PHB strategic plan, you know, it really will serve as the guide for the work of the PHB and help to build some shared goals. You know, I think we often have heard in the community that folks don't always know what the focus of the PHB is, how the PHB differs from some other entities. So having this strategic plan will really hopefully help to solidify what that work is and make it clear to the community. We also are required to have a strategic plan as a part of being a continuum of care. We also have not had an updated strategic plan since the 5-year plan that spanned 2016 to 2021. Not having an updated plan is largely due to COVID and the challenges with just being able to get folks together to work on a plan. So we certainly are past due for a new plan, and we're excited to be working on this one. So the purpose of the process, so the strategic plan process, is to get community and key stakeholder input as we work to build this plan. And that input is really going to be critical to guiding, sustaining, and improving Lane County's efforts to end homelessness and to assist folks with low incomes in becoming self-sufficient. The strategic plan is going to answer those 4 key questions of where are we currently with our COC and with our PHB, where are we going, what are the strategies that we're going to use to get there, and how will we adjust course to reach our destination. The strategic plan is also going to guide our efforts in some key areas over the next 3 years. Those areas are related to priorities and directives within funding and investments, planning and a continuous quality improvement process, advocacy, our systems operations, and programs and service delivery. And this is a timeline for the strategic plan. This, as you will see, we have already started this plan and are nearing or have started pieces of phase 2. So phase 1, starting in July, was focused on baseline mapping and stakeholder engagement. So we engaged members of PHB, LEAGUE, which is our Lived Experience Advisory Group, and then the MAC Group, which is the multi-agency collaborative that works on the all-in focused goals. We also, through surveys and other engagement, worked with frontline service providers. And I should note, we have been working with Brittany Manzo, who's a provides technical assistance for this planning, and she has done a lot of that engagement, a lot of those engagement efforts as well. As we moved into phase 2 in September and continue to be in phase 2 of this work, we hosted a system design clinic in early September. I'm going to touch on that on another slide. We've continued our ongoing community engagement and have worked to assess and set those priorities with the stakeholder groups that were mentioned, having been engaged in phase 1. As we move to phase 2 in November and December, we're really focusing on solidifying that strategic planning. So setting goals, developing objectives, and then finalizing the draft work plans. And then our final phase, which will be December to January, is getting that strategic plan finalized, continuing our stakeholder and community engagement. I did want to note that we have really heard that we need to increase engagement to some of the rural areas of the county, and so through our work with Brittany, we're working to further engage those areas of the county that we haven't done a great job of being able to connect with so far. Additionally, we're also, we have engaged lived experience in a way that I think is a significant improvement over our previous effort. So it's been really exciting to increase that engagement. But we do also need to focus on culturally specific groups and ensuring that we're engaging those groups. So that's going to be a continued part of all these phases, but I just wanted to highlight that. And then additionally, finally, I do want to just note that you as commissioners will be approving the strategic plan as it is finalized. So you'll have the opportunity to see that finalized plan and ultimately vote to adopt it. So the System Design Clinic was held on September 11th and 12th. It was facilitated by the National Alliance to End Homelessness, who's a entity that we've been working with closely over the last year or two. They previously had done a shelter best practices training for our community. We had 68 attendees that represented elected officials, service providers, our CCOs, several folks, individuals with lived experience of homelessness and or poverty, and then city and county staff and PHB members. It was a excited group, and I spent both days there, and it just, the energy in that room was exciting to be a part of. NAEH had identified some objectives for the design clinic, which include identifying the goals of an effective and equitable homeless response system, identifying those flow and bottleneck issues that we have seen within our local system, learning how to align interventions of our system, and then really digging into what the role of the local COC governance is in that goal of ending homelessness. And then, as noted, identifying the local priorities that our community has, which may be unique to the challenges that we face in our community. So again, I know Commissioner Farr was able to attend. Commissioner Beck, I think, was there for a period of time, perhaps, maybe not. Sorry, I thought you were there. A lot of meetings that I cannot remember.
If it was recent, I don't think I was able to go.
Regardless, it was a really exciting event. Having folks representing so many different areas was just an exciting time to get perspective. So we're looking forward to what builds out of that event as we work to finalize our plan. So moving us along here, want to give you all an update on the Lane County Navigation Center. Over the last several weeks, I've been working with Commissioner Senega regarding some community concerns that have been routed to him regarding some activities and behaviors that neighbors are seeing in the area of the Navigation Center. Have been really pleased to see Equitable Social Solutions, who's the provider who operates the Nav Center, really take those concerns into account and proactively work to make some changes to operations at the Nav Center, things that they can influence within their program, and then working with neighbors and particularly business owners to work on those issues, those neighborhood issues that they may not be able to directly influence themselves. So some of the key efforts that ESS has undertaken over the last, say, month and a half, they've had increased communication and collaboration with the Eugene Police Department. Just last week, they met with Lieutenant Sullivan, who is the lieutenant who oversees that neighborhood, just to identify ways that they can better communicate regarding some of the issues. So what the Nav Center has seen is that they can control and influence the behavior of the participants of their program, but they can't really influence, unsheltered individuals that are in the area that may be creating some of the challenges and behaviors. And they really need to partner with law enforcement to be able to address those issues. I will note that Lieutenant Sullivan in that meeting identified thinking that the uptick in that area may be directly related to displacement of there was a large encampment, several large encampments on the railroad tracks in West Eugene. He feels that many of the folks that have now moved into that neighborhood were residing in that encampment, and so that may be why the timing of this, of why we're seeing some increased community concerns in the neighborhood. Because as you know, the Nav Center has been operating now close to 3 years, and we have not seen this, not had these same concerns coming through previously. ESS is expanding the use of their security guards. So as you'll see in the graphic there on the right, I believe this week or next week they're installing that kiosk in the front of their building, and it'll be staffed by a security guard 24/7. So it will act as a deterrent for those folks that are not participants in their program, and then we'll also, provide additional eyes on the neighborhood so that security staff can then work in concert with law enforcement to address any issues that may be happening. They have been really focused on neighbor engagement. And I will say from the beginning of the NAV Center, ESS has been great at engaging with their neighbors and primarily the business owners in that area. They have a monthly community meeting that they host at the NAV Center. It's actually tomorrow, where they invite their neighbors to come and discuss any challenges that they're seeing or any ways that they feel ESS could improve services. So they have also done some targeted outreach to the business owners that have been contacting Commissioner Senega just to really address their concerns directly and find ways that they can help to mitigate those issues. They've also increased invitation to those community advisory meetings. So they have done another round of outreach to neighbors to really hope to get them coming to those meetings and open up those lines of communication. And then they have a good neighbor agreement that all of the participants of the shelter sign, which really, it identifies the expectations of those participants while they're in their shelter, but it also highlights that they will be good neighbors in the neighborhood, so they won't do things in the neighborhood that are going to be seen as a detriment. So they, have expectations that they would not be, loitering in the area. They would not be inviting, friends of theirs to the shelter that may not be participants, and doing any sort of behavior that could be seen as negative, far away from the neighborhood, so that it doesn't come back to look like it's a NAV Center issue. And I want to thank Commissioner Senega. We had a tour of the NAV Center together last week, and I know ESS was really thankful to have you come and for them to be able to share their efforts. So, it will be an ongoing process, but I'm hopeful that through these efforts we'll be able to see some increases in reduction in those behaviors. One other piece I do want to highlight is that we're excited soon to have a mobile medical health program that's a partnership with Public Health that will be coming out to the NAV Center on a weekly basis to provide medical services to the participants of that program. As was highlighted by Glenn, who's the ESS director on the tour with Commissioner Senega, they see folks with incredibly high medical needs, and they, often are folks that have not accessed medical care for a variety of reasons and often for many years. So it'll be really exciting to have that new partnership starting, to help to address those medical needs of the folks that they're serving. And again, just always want to highlight the importance of the NAV Center as we continue to have these improvement conversations. They remain at or near capacity every night, which means that's 75 individuals who are not out in our community and unsheltered. Because they receive referral through coordinated entry, they are serving folks at the top of the centralized wait list, which are those folks that are deemed to have the highest vulnerability in our community, which often means they have high medical and or mental health needs. An impressive outcome, almost 50% of the participants involved in the NAV Center were exited to stable housing situations. And of those who exited to permanent housing, all of them remained housed after 6 months, which is especially impressive when you look at the high vulnerability of the population they're serving. So just a reminder of the importance of the work of the NAV Center, which I know that you all know. But we also reflected that to the folks that we chatted with that had, the neighbors in the community, just to remind them of the whys behind why the NAV Center exists. Pass it over to Andrea to cover diversion, or I can do the slides for you.
I don't think it's gonna pass.
Okay.
So I'm Andrea. I don't think this is the first time that you all have heard of diversion. So I'm just gonna highlight some of the great outcomes of last fiscal year and then highlight some of the changes and shifts we're seeing in this fiscal year with new partnerships. It'll be quite brief. Sure. Be a little thing up there. I don't want you. Well, we aren't going to get into that, like the nitty gritties of that slide anyway. So I was just going to highlight where diversion is in our homeless response system, and it's just that very first engagement when you're when a participant might be presenting at a traditional agency that serves folks who are experiencing homelessness. And what that looks like is you can sort of imagine like a hospital triage room. And so historically and before diversion was a thing, every time somebody engages our coordinated entry system, folks would sort of all receive the same intervention. I'll pause.
Yeah, sorry, that's not on my computer.
Yeah, no, Metro has the right view. It's the internal. Yeah, Kate's got it. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
It's a complex slide anyway. So we're looking at where the purple thing is, and so essentially operates like a triage in a hospital room where we're not giving the same intervention to everyone who presents, and we're sort of slowing down the process where our traditional homeless service providers are having a very engaged, client-centered housing problem-solving conversation to really talk through what that individual's strengths are, what their barriers are, and what might be a way in which that they can self-resolve their homelessness in a quick way and divert them away from our going further into our homeless response system. Similar to today's conversation around deflection, so sort of going this way instead of this way. So again, diversion it's more or less just a housing problem solving conversation. So really slowing down the intervention of going into deeper assessments and putting folks on waiting lists, but really talking to the individual who's in front of you around their housing experience, their strengths, their barriers, what permanent housing might look like for them, and what their goals are. So it's client-centered, meaning that the housing is what housing looks like to the participant themselves. So it could look like housing with family or friends, or it could look like a traditional lease, one-bedroom lease like many folks live in, or it could look like sober living housing in this circumstances. So it's really whatever housing looks like to the participant. And then, of course, the next step would be identifying resources to help that participant get to their housing outcome, and that's sort of going further into the diversion, the funding resources in which that we'll talk about. So again, it's just one possible pathway to exit homelessness. It's not the only thing in which that our homeless service providers are doing. And it's just a tool in the tool belt. So we're having this problem-solving conversation, and it might work for some folks, and it might not work for all. So we're gonna have it first before we go further into our homeless response system. But it's certainly not gonna work for everyone, right? Some folks don't have a quick and easy exit from their homeless crisis. And it's also not like an ongoing, service-intensive, sort of expensive, long-term intervention for their housing crisis. So these are our outcomes from last year. I think James highlighted that the round one all-in executive order was specifically serving folks who were unsheltered. And so we had a very limited eligibility of folks had to be living in that place not meant for human habitation. So that excluded emergency shelters and other sort of eligibility buckets. And so we served 616 households in the diversion program, and 522 of those households were exited into permanent housing. So that's that one-time payment, quick and easy, self sort of led into permanent housing for those unsheltered participants. And then these were referrals that were either filtering from 211, so a self-referral saying, hi, I'm experiencing homelessness. I figured out how I can get out of my crises. I just need X, Y, and Z support. And then we would sort of process that, reach out to the participant, and get them from where they were to where they needed to be. Or also our sort of traditional providers of saying, hey, we have this person who is unsheltered, engaged with street outreach, and we've identified this housing solution together. We need this support. How those referrals were filtering. So this round of all-in funds, there's been a wider eligibility to our program. So now we can serve folks who are in our emergency shelters, and we can serve folks who are fleeing domestic violence. And then we're also building our partnerships with folks who are seeking treatment services. So again, in context of earlier's presentation with our burn networks and deflection and all of those folks who are self-identifying that pathway for their ending their housing crises. And so the new partnerships that we've built with Diversion as of like July 1, so brand new partnerships are with those burn networks, our sober living houses, our victim service providers, and our treatment providers as well. So folks who are not normally engaged with Diversion have been sort of our front runners in this since July 1, which has been a really amazing partnership. Then I would also note, I think as of, you had mentioned in the slide before that we were slated to serve 110 households this fiscal year, and as of yesterday, we've served 130. So these folks, these referrals are coming in pretty consistently from these providers.
Do you know, sorry, how many people, 130 households, how many individuals do you know?
Great question. Most of them are single households. I don't have that number on top of my head, but most of them are single.
Thank you.
And then this is just an example of what these new partnerships sort of look like in practice. And so these are de-identified of a participant that presented at a burn network, had just given birth to a baby who was in the NICU, and had an opportunity to go to detox and then straight from detox to a sober living house. So where they could make that connection the moment that they presented at our burn network, as opposed to presenting at the burn network, doing the great work to get to detox, but then not having a straight connection to a sober living facility where folks could be reconnected with their family. And so all of that was client-led and based off the great work between our program staff and then the relationship with Restored Connections in that particular situation. And then another de-identified example of a new partnership is with our victim service providers. So households can present at a victim service provider, go through that process with them, and the victim service provider can do the connection to diversion to where that household doesn't have to then present separately to diversion and retell their story and have to go through that eligibility process. And we're able to help them in that same day get what they need to get to a place that's safe and permanent housing for them. So it's a more trauma-informed approach and sort of a brand new partnership in that space as well.
I think that's it for our presentation, so happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much. To the board. Everybody's absorbing until
a lot
Commissioner Farr.
The foam settle. You know, a few years ago, people asked us, well, what are you doing about homelessness? And today you've given a great example of the many areas that we are addressing homelessness. And one thing I'm going to point out, and I'll ask you this is a question, what does Governor Kotek have to say about our efforts? And you know, that's a kind of a rhetorical question because we all know that Governor Kotek is claiming a level of success in the programs that she initiated, the outstanding and innovative programs that she initiated when she first became governor. And one of the reasons she can claim that success, and I'm looking directly in the three of your eyes, one of the reasons that she can claim that success is because of the tremendous job that's been done here in Lane County. And she's very quick to point that out. Every opportunity she gets, it seems, she points out that Lane County is doing a superb job of illustrating and demonstrating how it can be done with the resources that are available. And from the beginning, I think from the initiation of the multi-agency collaborative in the early days when we talked about how can this sudden surge of money be utilized effectively and how can we determine the outcomes and how can we even exceed our goals, your boots are on the ground. And it's just been an amazing work. Andrea, you've had a chance, and Kate, you've had a chance to talk directly to the department heads at Oregon State through the LGAC committee. And you see the kind of admiration that they have for the work you're being done. I'm not going to talk much about it. I'm going to let other commissioners talk about it. But one thing I will point out is diversion, the fiscal year 23-24 diversion. 676 households received diversion assistance, 350% of our goal. 350% of the goal that we established. How do you do that? Well, you do it by identifying ways, innovative ways to spend as little dollars, rare dollars, on as much outcome as you possibly can. And the ways that we're able to do it, I can say we because I get to sit and watch you do it. So I get to say we. That's the only reason I can say we, is because we identify ways to use our resources the most effectively to keep people in housing. So the change from last year was an increase of 218%, but at 350% of the goal that we outlined in the governor's program, it's just astounding. Jaws drop when they see the kinds of numbers that you're producing through the programs that have been initiated through all in Lane County, through the collaborative work of the multi-agency collaborative, and through the resources that you've brought together. I hope we all have a chance to not just listen to the presentation, because it went pretty quick. These slides, if you look at the slides, they're just chock full of information that we can share with the people that we serve on how we are addressing homelessness in Lane County. Are we solving the problem? Absolutely not. But are we doing more probably than any other region or county in the state? We are, yes, and here's how we're doing it, by identifying ways to efficiently use the money. You know, we talk about, for such a long time, rapid rehousing was the focus. And when people become homeless, get them back into housing as quickly as possible. Well, of course we have to do that, but one thing that we're doing is we're helping people not slip into homelessness by utilizing diversion programs, and you can do it with this many dollars instead of this many dollars. And Chair Trieger, the work that this team is doing is, I mean, you need to be on a pedestal. We need to shine beacons on you and let people know the work that you are doing. It makes me proud. When I sit up there and talk to people about Lane County, I listen to them, and Kate, I think you're going to be at the next LGAC meeting, making a presentation on the success that we've had here in Lane County. It just, I sit back and I glow because we really are addressing the job in ways that no other county is doing. But to point out in a very real fashion that we're not completing the work by any stretch of the imagination, but we are making strides in that direction. I'm not going to go into any more specifics other than the diversion program, but the work that you're doing is, it just should make every single person in this room and every single person associated with our Health and Human Service Department, with our Human Services Department, proud of the job that's being done. So thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Commissioner Seneca.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also share the same excitement that Commissioner Farr does. You know, one thing that really just kind of put it in perspective, and Audrey, you said it, diversion is a housing solution, and you know, Lane County is doing that. Housing is what housing looks like to the participant. When you sit there and think about it, you're 100% spot on. What my thought of housing is and what someone else's is completely different, and filling all those voids and seeing that from all perspectives is huge. James, I want to thank you. You've been so responsive in some of these issues that we've been working through with the Navigation Center, setting up meetings instantly and really getting in and seeing what Glenn and his team are doing at the Navigation Center. They're doing very impressive work. And one thing I loved about talking with Glenn and his team is they understand the scrutiny they're under. I mean, for the neighborhood they're in, there are 2 schools around there. They're on a main thoroughfare. And just realizing that the work they're doing is outside, you know, they're doing work outside of where the Navigation Center lies because of the eyes on them. And there's always eyes. So just, yeah, thanks everybody for the work. Yeah, I wanted to give you kudos.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Agree with what's been said, for sure. I've been lucky enough to follow all the effort for the all-in work and know that we're leading the state in our outcomes, and it's really impressive what we've been able to accomplish. And not only that, but the growth that we've had as a community to work interjurisdictionally and to have folks from different parts of the county coming together on a regular basis and really building that connection and that rapport that was lacking, frankly, before, has been, I think, the key to our success. I also wanted to highlight, like, this diversion number of 676%. And you said that was one staff member that is doing all that work? I mean, wow. That, I don't know who that is, but I like to meet them because that's seriously impressive. That's a lot of people being diverted, and that's, I mean, if you can imagine not having that work at all and these 676 people also vying on all our waiting lists, I don't know if we could double that or triple that, but that is like the pipeline of people that need assistance. This is really reducing the need in that pipeline, and I find that that is the upstream work that we really could build on. And I'd love to see how we can grow that. Because I'm not sure that one person, we should demand that number be even more for one human being. But I'd love to see how we can grow that diversion. And I'm not sure if that's part of this all-in round 2 or not. But if it is, I think it would be worth our while. The other item was the permanent supportive housing wait list down from 100 and some days to 37 days. That's great. You know, as a housing provider in the past, I have done all that paperwork for one person that you need to do in order to be eligible and fulfill all your administrative requirements for federal and state money, and it's extensive. And you have to be skilled in it, because if you mess up in part of the paperwork and you're audited later, then you get disqualified for the funding, and then that person has to move, and that's just something you want to completely avoid. And reducing that paperwork time is super challenging. And hopefully we can reduce it a little bit more. But knowing that, I'm not sure most people understand like the qualification paperwork and collecting information needed for that is so extensive, that it almost embeds a certain amount of time required to turn homes. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I know that we need to make sure these people are income qualified, but that is a place in federal and state government bureaucracy that I have a major problem with, because then beds are left unused. And we don't want a bed going unused for 37 days. So if we can cut that down even further, that would be fantastic. And the only other comment I want to make is we've seen a lot of stats today, a lot of numbers, a lot of percentages, but each individual number is a real human being behind that who's actually being cared for. And that's a big deal. The amount of human lives that we are actually impacting in a beneficial way through your work is wonderful. I know that they know it, but sometimes it's easy to forget when we're just looking at a lot of statistics that each one is a human, and we need to honor that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Chair, do you want to hop in?
Thank you. Good work on all accords. I support all the commissioners' comments. I think I mean, to tag on to Commissioner Buck's comment about that single person doing 600 and some odd, that's like 3 a day. I mean, think about it. By the time lunch is over, you've already housed 2 people. That's blows my mind. But I think incredibly, too, a number of months ago, Kate, you and I had a conversation in my office about what we're really doing and what our approach is. And there was a successful survey done in Portland about the way that we do homelessness and homeless providing on certain criteria. And one was, do we address the basic causes of homelessness at first? And do we have some sort of way to get them into permanent housing in a linear or a progressive fashion? And I think just based on what I've extrapolated from all the data and stuff, you guys have kind of tailored that into the Lane County way where, hey, you know, Andrea's, and what's the kind of housing does this person need? And to Commissioner Senega's point, it's not my version or your version or somebody else's, but it gets them to address their immediate needs and to progressively put them into a place where they can be self-sufficient. And I think that's a great success model for Lane County. I chaired the Metropolitan Policy Committee, and the other day I mentioned something to them. I said, look, who is our infrastructure inspiration? What country or county are we trying to model ourselves after? And I got this really awkward 30 seconds of silence thinking that no one was going to comment. And one guy, Vidal from the ODOT, he finally said, well, Commissioner, let me say this. Lane County is our inspiration. We do what needs to get done. And so I passed that on to you saying that, you know, a lot of times we think about, well, how come we're not doing like so-and-so? It's because no one's doing it like us. And I think that's a testament to your creativity, your innovation, and your professionalism, and sincerely your passion to get the job done and increase the matrix of which my constituents and every other constituents of our colleagues here are demanding some numbers to say how we're doing. Are we making progress, and is it measurable? And you guys are answering those criticisms with overwhelming efforts and accomplishments. And so good the heck on you. Good job. Thank you.
Well, I'll just tag on to all these comments, just to add to one of the things Vice Chair was just saying is also your perseverance in spite of all the challenges you face as a workforce and as folks doing the work, with the difficult conversations with partners, with this board sometimes, you know, having healthy doses of skepticism or asking for more. So it really does just speak to your vision for the work, and that's based on experience in the community, in other jobs, and listening to the people that you're serving. Because one thing, you know, as Commissioner Buck was saying, these statistics are people, and you know, some of my colleagues have said, you're giving us data, we can go back to the people we serve to prove the work. Well, the people you're serving are also people we serve. And they don't have the kind of access to us that some other folks do, that might be neighbors to some of these programs or so on. It's a really important part of our equity work that we focus so much commitment to this work. Talk about, you know, who has access to what kind of resources, and our attention and our commitment to service. It's the folks you're serving, absolutely, first and foremost, because they have the least access and resource to demand these services. So thank you for that. To that, I have a question with the Navigation Center, because we're all on some group emails, I'm sure, because it's in your district, you're getting additional communication. Is the bulk of the issues being raised sort of people's discomfort or lack of understanding with a certain population or unpredictable behavior? Or is there actual, at times, criminal behavior? And I ask this because with the deflection program perhaps coming online, is that not going to be yet another tool to start seeing some real change in getting the service to the people who are being flagged for attention by neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix of just there being unsheltered folks that are just living in that area, but there are, and the Nav Center, Glenn highlighted it too, that they, you know, see folks using drugs openly in the properties around their building, and they don't have a mechanism aside from partnering with EPD, calling EPD to address those issues. So there are criminal behaviors that are happening that hopefully the deflection program would be able to address.
Great. My two other questions, one with the rapid rehousing, do we keep data on recurrence, like for how long once we've you know, you said they stay stable for yay long, but yeah, how do we track data? So if it's a person who it looks like on a recurring, even if it's pretty protracted, 9 months, a year, needs rent assistance again, and what do we do for that next tier of stabilizing someone in that situation?
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. So there, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, if somebody's been rapidly rehoused, and then 9 months later, let's say they're in a seasonal employment, they need that support again, that infusion of rent or utility assistance. Like, are we tracking that differently, or is there yet another approach then for someone in that situation?
Yeah, so I mean, we're starting to dig more into returns to homelessness and returns to the system. I've been talking a lot with Carly Walker, our HMIS supervisor, about how we can look at those returns in HMIS and to the different program types. Using rapid rehousing as an example, you know, some program types, there's rules around how frequently or how often someone could access a rapid rehousing program. So it may be that we're looking at a different intervention. And just to piggyback off what Andrea was saying about diversion can be used at any point in the system with anyone in the system. So it may be somebody who is coming back, returning to homelessness. We would still use a diversion approach for a household that had previously experienced homelessness, or maybe is currently experiencing homelessness, because it's that housing problem-solving piece that's where the power lies with it.
Okay.
And actually, to your question, we're able to track the folks who have previously accessed resources such as rapid rehousing and then are coming back and looking to access prevention, for example. And we have been continuously looking at who is eligible for prevention, simply because we can't serve everyone. And we know that one of the best predictors of future houselessness is previous houselessness. And so we absolutely want to serve those folks that are becoming unstable again, because their likelihood of going back into homelessness is very high.
Great, that's perfect, thank you. And then my last question is on the Youth Homelessness Development Program grant. the host home program, how is that similar or different than, like, I'm a former foster parent, so I know the kind of vetting and review and follow-up you get when you qualify to do that through the DHS. How does that program, that host home program work? What's the vetting and support for those host families?
Yeah, and Kate may know more than I do, just because wasn't in my role at the time that programming was being developed. But my understanding is the vetting is very similar to a foster parent or a foster family. I think that has also led to some of the challenges of being able to identify host homes and families to be host home providers, because it is intensive. And so I think we continue to look at ways to identify or find ways to lessen that burden while also ensuring the safety of the household, because obviously these are very vulnerable youth, and we would want to make sure that they're going into safe environments.
So is that our staff doing those assessments and certifying homes as qualifying, or is it through DHS? How are we doing that?
Go ahead.
So it's through the provider itself, and in fact, the provider who offers the host homes themselves actually works to place youth in foster care as well, and so they utilize the same criterion for both households.
Great, thank you. Fantastic. All right. Well, as always, follow up from Commissioner Farr.
Actually, I asked a rhetorical question earlier. What is Governor Kotek saying about Lane County? And I wonder if we could talk about that just a little bit, not to pat ourselves on the back, but to demonstrate that what is happening here. I'll lead you off, but I'm going to ask if you can reflect a little bit on how the governor is recognizing Lane County. Across the state, providers rehoused 529 households from January 11th through June 30th. 81% of the goal state. That number, 529 across the state. Lane County rehoused 345 of those 529. 340% of its goal to rehouse at least 110 households. Wow, that's pretty amazing numbers. If you look at us statewide, how are we doing it? What's Governor Kotek saying about it, and how are we going to parlay this, as mentioned earlier, to have other counties look at our success and see how we're doing it, to see how they can adapt it to their particular situations. Anything you can say about that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's kind of echoing around the hallways right now what Governor Kotek is saying.
I mean, first of all, I think that's a real testament to our providers doing that work and their ability to get folks housed, and especially in such an incredibly challenging housing market. I also think, again, we've been talking a lot about diversion, but that is an approach that not many communities are doing, that I think is also really just an example of creative programming that the MAC group has been able to develop and to look into. And oftentimes we're in meetings where we're kind of informing the state on diversion as a best practice. And so I think that we're just ahead of the game. And I think other communities have expressed a lot of interest in what we're doing with diversion in particular. But yeah, I mean, the numbers are impressive. And again, just a testament to our providers that are doing that work on a daily basis.
And, Marion County is roughly our size in population, roughly our size in services provided, et cetera. And they house 84. And we housed, 329. I mean, that's just a difference of approach and a difference of effectiveness. And you mentioned the MAC group, and some of the names of the folks on that MAC group. You've got Bob Teeter from Florence. You've got Lori Pearl from Catholic Community Services. Chris McAllister from Carry It Forward. Mike Fleck. The names go down the list. Every one of them, in my experience, has been a contributor to the effort of the work and directly helping you to I guess codify the things that you're doing. I think early on they identified some of the things that we can do more effectively, and man, you grabbed it, you ran with the ball, and look at the outcome. It's something that we really should take a moment to reflect on that, on the work that's been done. And sometimes, James, you got to look in the rearview mirror, because what's on the horizon seems so daunting, but look what's in the rearview mirror and how much is being accomplished. So bravo, thank you.
Thank you all, and I hope you take some of this feedback back to your team and let them know how this was received. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely will. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Winding down the morning, we have item 9, County Administration. We have an elections update and any other announcements, Mr. Mokrahysky, you'd like to share with us this morning.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. I'll be brief on the elections update, thanks to Dina Dawson, our county clerk, who provided this information, and to Tanya Ellis for posting it on the agenda. So you can find this material, a more expanded version of what I'll share with you, linked to this item on the agenda. To date, we've been issuing absentee ballots over the counter since September 23rd. 77 absentee ballots were issued on Monday, September 23rd, and since that time, we've done approximately 35 ballots per day. Voters can vote in a voting booth in the lobby and return the ballot through our lobby drop box, or they can return it through U.S. Postal Service. We did a tabletop training exercise with our elections team, Lane County Emergency Management, the Secretary of State's Office, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure, Security and Local Law Enforcement Agencies. Very successful effort just to prepare for what we anticipate is going to be a significant election. We have a Blue River recall. I think you're familiar with this, but there were 4 recall petitions for 2 candidates in Blue River Water and Sanitation District and 2 candidates in the Blue River Park and Recreation District. My understanding is it's 2 individuals that sit on both of those. The election office finished verifying the signatures October 2nd, 2024, and found them to be sufficient. One of those board members has resigned their position on both boards. The other has filed his statements of justification, so recall election will be held there. 123 votes in the district, so small district, but that is happening. More information you can find at lanecountyor.gov/elections. Some key deadlines. I want to say the deadline to register to vote for first-time registrants is October 15th. That's next Tuesday. I'm not looking at a calendar, but I think that's next Tuesday, October 15th. Again, deadline to register to vote for first-time registrants. 21 ballot boxes will open countywide on October 17th. That would make that Thursday. Yes, right.
But who's watching?
My daughter and my mom's birthday is October 16th, so that's the kind of the date that I'm using is, so yes, October 17th is next Thursday. So the ballot box will be open, then live stream broadcast starts October 17th, same date next Thursday. Ballot return dashboard will go live October 25th, and then our deconstruction teams start opening ballots on October 28th. I want to provide finally an update on the Secretary of State's update. You may have seen news reporting that on yesterday afternoon, we were notified of another 302 potential non-citizen records statewide. 18 of those are in Lane County for a grand total of 64 potential non-citizens that were mistakenly registered to vote through the DMV. So again, I'll say of the total statewide number, the total that's estimated for Lane County, 64 potential non-citizens that were mistakenly registered to vote through the DMV. And I want to say that, clarify that non-citizen is different than illegal, someone that is here that is here potentially illegally. That these are individuals that were registered for a license through some form of identification through the State Department of Motor Vehicles. The State Department of Motor Vehicles mistakenly used those individuals' identification or other information to say that they were and noted them as being registered to vote. So 64 individuals that were non-citizens that were mistakenly registered in Lane County through the DMV. The governor and the Secretary of State have called for an independent audit of the motor voter process, and the governor has directed the DMV to pause transmitting voter data until the completion of a full-scale review. So appreciate that, there is effort happening, work happening to verify who should be registered, who should not be registered, and cleaning up those roles as we move forward. The only other note I wanted to make here, non-election related, we'll have another update for the board next Tuesday. October 15th on elections. We're going to do this each Tuesday until election day. The other note I wanted to make here is that we're in the process of trying to select a consultant to assist us in our strategic plan update, the board strategic plan update, which we're embarking on. We've solicited some proposals from consultants, and we've asked the chair and vice chair to join in assisting staff in selecting that group. We want to get this up and running as quickly as possible because we have 2 years in January with this board, and we are really committed to identifying our strategic priorities and goals for this board over the next 2 years. And I'll just note that while oftentimes we focus or others focus on the points of disagreement among our board or other boards, you spent the last several hours today talking about points that you all are significantly unified around. The deflection program, the all-in program. We can talk about areas like mobile crisis, the stabilization center, our navigation center, permanent supportive housing. All of these things that the board is to my knowledge, unified and unanimous in your support of those things. So we really want to carve out what are these areas that are most important to the community and most important to the board who represents, each of you who represent county residents, for us to focus on and achieve the goals that we want to achieve in the course of the next 2 years. So that's what the work around our strategic plan is. What is the roadmap that the 5 of you say, these are the things we want to accomplish? If nothing else, these are the things we want to accomplish in the next 2 years. So really important work that we want to get set as close to the beginning of 2025 as possible so that we have that roadmap moving forward. So just wanted to call that out for the rest of you. Appreciate the chair and vice chair participating in that process and assisting us in finding the necessary support and technical expertise to get that work moving forward. That's it, Chair.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to our clerk for the elections updates, and I know we get them after Election Day too to hear returns and so on, and I just want to, 2 points. The 15th, as you mentioned, is the deadline to register, but also everybody should check their registration. If you've moved or had a name change or something, that's the deadline for everybody who is registered to have their registration current. And really appreciate you highlighting the issue around the non-citizen folks being mistakenly put on the voter rolls. And to me, catching something like that is actually a sign that the system is working. It's not a sign that our Oregon's system doesn't work or has problems. It's the way that you have those checks and balances well in advance of when somebody might actually cast a ballot that they're not eligible to cast. So that's great work. And again, real appreciation to our clerk for all that she does. She's phenomenal. I think another thing we all agree on. Yeah, great. All right. With that, at the sound of my gavel, we will be recessed for lunch and be back here at 1:30 in Harris Hall for our afternoon session. We are in recess.